Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Had Villainous Quirk Called Fear Toxin Part 1. Before we start, please go support Prime1999 for writing that awesome fanfic. Fear can be a powerful weapon in a world with powers, but is it good for heroics? Izuku Midoriya didn't know if you even could become a hero with fear, but that won't stop him from trying. Despite the bullying and beating he gets at school for being a villain, he will try and prove them wrong. Chapter 1. It had been a really long Thursday for Izuku, who was currently slumped against the wall. He was bleeding from the lip, a bruised cheek, and his head felt buzzy. And right in front of him was the culprit of his beating. "That's what you get, you bucking villain!" Katsuki all but screeched, a scowl that seemed to be permanently etched onto his face. "Stay away from you, you hear me, Deku?" Yeah, today was a real chipper day. He just got his daily beatings from his former friend. He did wonder where Bakudo's lackeys were. All this and for what? Having a villain's quirk and wanting to attend University next year, really? This is utterly bulldash. "Papa, are you okay?" He was pulled out of his thoughts by a scream of a little girl with snow-white hair, big red eyes, and a little horn on her head. He looked over to her and smiled weakly. Right, Arie must have heard the whole thing. Those bastards he called minions must have dragged her away out of sight, but probably close enough to hear, he thought as he slowly stood up. "Yeah, I'm fine, Arie. Gag, let's go home, shall we?" She nodded, though her eyes were still filled with worry. "My beautiful daughter, Arie. She came into my life about 3 years ago now. I still remember the day you called me Papa for the first time," Izuku thought. "Bastards, if I find out they hurt Arie, I'll kill them where they stand," Izuku growled in his head, before pausing and thinking on what he said. "Okay, maybe that's going too far, but I would make them live their worst nightmares, and the point still stands if they try with my snowball." As they were walking out of the building and down the streets to get home, Izuku glanced down to his daughter, who was holding onto his hand like he would disappear. "She's still worried about the beating she heard me get, isn't she?" With a sigh, they continued walking. He hated seeing her like this, but maybe they could bake something together that always put a smile on her face. That, or he could make candy apples and watch her impatiently bounce around for her treat. Eventually they walked under an underpass and heard some dripping, oozing noise that came from behind them. Then out of nowhere a sludge-like monster came at them. A small and medium-sized skin suit. Not ideal, but it will have to do. Panic took over Izuku as he pushed Arie out of the way so she wouldn't get caught and hurt by the villain in front of them. The next thing he knew was he was being suffocated by the sludge monster, and Arie screamed for help and to let him go, but with little success. Suddenly a powerful gust of wind hit and destroyed the sludge villain. His eyes were blurry. He saw a vague shape of a tall, muscular man that stood at the entrance of the underpass, but the shape was slowly fading. Izuku's only thought before blacking out was that Arie would be safe, and whoever that was would keep her safe. Almight was currently running around in the sewers trying to find the sludge villain. That was until he heard a little girl screaming, "Let go of Papa!" When Almight heard that, he ran like a bat out of hell to help them. He did not want a family to be torn by that villain. Once he arrived, he saw what looked like a young man trapped in the villain. So using a Detroit smash on the villain, the gust of wind caused it to disperse, revealing the young man that was held inside. The young man hit the floor with a small thud, and the little girl ran to him, shaking the boy's unmoving body. "Papa! Wake up! Please!" "So that is the father?" "A bit young if you asked me." Almight quietly gathered the villain in a bottle he had on him, and made his way over to the father and daughter with the boy waking up, coughing up what remained of the villain that made its way down his throat. What happened?" His voice sounded a little raspy. "Papa!" the girl yelped, glomping her father in a hug to which he gladly returned. "Are you okay?" "I'm alright, but are you alright, Arie?" The little girl, Almight now identified as Arie, nodded her head and nuzzled into his shirt, seeming to calm down. "Thought we lost you there," Almight asked, concerned for his safety. "Can you tell me what happened, young Izuku Midoriya? And as to what happened, me and Arie were on our way home when the villain attacked out of nowhere. My body moved on its own and pushed her out of the way before she could get hurt." His body acted on its own? I may have to keep an eye on him, Almight thought. "Well, young Midoriya, I shall leave you to continue your track home. Be safe." All Might stated, ready to leave. 1 second, All Might. Do you think it's possible for someone with what some people call a villain's quirk can be a hero? All Might looked to be deep in thought before answering. It matters not the quirk, what matters is your heart. Tell me, what is your quirk? Oh. It's called fear toxin. It converts my sweat into a toxin that, when injected, or in a gas form created with chemicals breathed in, will cause the target to hallucinate their worst fears. Though I am also susceptible to its effects. Quite the handy quirk, you'll definitely get far. I do believe you can be a hero, he said with a grin on his face. Now if you excuse me, I should really be going. Farewell. With that and a smile plastered on his face, All Might took off. I could have told you that, Papa, Arie said with a giggle. Izuku just shook his head and they made their way home. After a couple minutes' walk, they saw their home approach them, with Arie getting excited with every step because that meant they could open up and she can help her papa. Their home wasn't anything special. It was just a little cafe with 2 points of entry into the house on top, one inside the cafe and one outside. On top of the little cafe were the words "The Happy Hero Cafe" written on a plaque. Izuku opened the door to allow Arie to rush inside so they could start serving. Seeing the smile on her little face, the young father couldn't help but have a smile of his own and reminisce back to when she first barged into his life. It was 5 years ago. The day was like any other, with Izuku serving his customers, talking to some of the regulars that came in, the odd, rude, or annoying customer, and a few new ones who were passing by. It was later that evening when he was taking the trash out he heard a whine further down an alleyway to the left of his building. The more he listened, the more it sounded like a baby's cry. Moving further down was when he saw it. A little baby girl no older than a month was laying in a cardboard box, wrapped in a white blanket. Quickly he looked around before picking the box up and taking it back inside and out of the cold. He gently lifted the baby out to soothe her. That was when he saw a note in the box. Deciding to picking it up, it read, "To whomever is reading this and wondering why I left this baby where I did, I simply cannot deal with her anymore, not after she killed her father by rewinding him. I was going to give her to her grandfather, but decided against it. Her name is Arie. She was born December 21st, and if you want this cursed child, she's yours." That hitch. Who would dare blame their child for accidental quirk death by manifestation, or AQDM? Izuku's blood was boiling, seething in anger, wondering why people like this couldn't be shot in the street. Sighing, Izuku calmed down and looked at the baby in his arms, her little tuft of snow-white hair that peeked through along with a little nub of a horn. And when she finally opened her big round eyes, they revealed that they were such a beautiful ruby red that stood out against her porcelain skin and held curiosity about the man holding her. Damn it, he was going to do something stupid. He always had a weakness for cute things, and god damn it, she was adorable. Plus he didn't have the heart to stick her in an orphanage or in the foster system. Besides, holding her in his arms felt somehow right. He leaned down and almost immediately she grabbed onto his nose and refused to let go, drawing a chuckle from Izuku. "Hello Arie, I'll be looking after you from now on." Raising Arie were some of the best, worst, most awkward and most informative years of his life. Was he a perfect father? No, not by a long shot. In fact, he didn't plan on being her father, instead more like an older brother. But when she said her first word, and that word being Papa, he broke into tears and quietly accepted his new role and title. He made mistakes and had a few bumps along the way. Changing a diaper was not fun to figure out, but he managed. Turns out the internet was more helpful than just looking at videos and memes. One of those being when microwaving a bottle, dab some of it on your skin before you give it to your baby. He learned that one the hard way. The most troubling was his school, where he had to take her as a baby. Those assholes did not make his life easier. He thought that at least they would tone it down for the baby. But nope, they cracked it up to 11. Hell, if Arie even cried a little as a baby, you know what all babies do. His class would explode, screaming for her to shut up. Even the teachers threw away stuff he had in her mouth. The only teacher who was slightly understanding was one who had a kid himself, but he got fired for trying to help him. She was not free from their sneers, calling her a cursed child or a bastard's child. That was also the day that when someone insulted her, he would fight back. He didn't care about what people say or do to him, but nobody insults his daughter. The day in the cafe went on with no unusual hiccup. That was until the bell rang with the door opening. Looking up, Izuku saw not one, not two but three pro-heroes, more specifically Midnight, Present Mike and Eraserhead. He quickly made his way to their table, all the while trying not to freak out. "Hi, welcome to the Happy Hero Cafe. May I take your order?" Midnight was the first to order, saying she wanted some green tea with a muffin. Present Mike asked for honey tea and a chicken sandwich. As of Eraserhead, "Give me the best and strongest coffee you have." "Okay, your orders will be ready in a few minutes," Izuku said happily as he made his way to the counter ready to make what they ordered. Hisashi spoke, confusion and a little concern in his voice. "Doesn't that kid seem a little young to be working here?" The other two pros thought about it. He did seem a little young to be working here. Their thoughts were interrupted by a little happy voice that said, "Here's your order." The three looked down to see the most cutest thing in the world. A little girl was in a little chef outfit, hat included, with a name tag saying Arie Midoriya written on it while holding a tray with their orders on it. Namuri and Hisashi cooed at the little girl. Aizawa hid his smile under his capture gear. "Well, ain't you the cutest thing ever? What's your name?" Namuri cooed at the little girl, who beamed a smile at her. "My name's Arie Midoriya. I asked Papa if it was okay for me to sit with you and he told me to ask you if it was okay." Arie asked. Hisashi all but yelled out, "Of course you can!" Luckily he couldn't use his quirk thanks to Aizawa, and with another beaming smile Arie climbed up and sat next to Namuri. "Damn, this is good coffee," Aizawa mumbled, taking a sip from his beverage before looking at Arie. "So kid, who is your dad?" He wanted to get some answers but was told that her dad ran the establishment, and how he adopted her. As time passed, it was just the three of them and Arie that were still in the cafe when a voice came from behind them. "I kinda figured you'd like to speak with me." They turned around to see the same boy who took our orders. Before Aizawa could open his mouth, Arie yelled out to the boy, "Papa!" Jumping down from her seat, running straight into his open arms, engulfing the boy in a hug which he returned with a smile on his face, he picked her up and pulled up an empty chair and sat with the three pro-heroes with Arie on his lap. "I hope Arie was well behaved with you." "Papaya! I'm always good," Arie whined. "Like when you try to steal apples from the counter when you think I'm not looking?" Arie flinched at that, thinking she had been sneaky. Evidently not, it seems. "Don't worry, she was an utter doll, she just asked about our hero names and our stories," Namuri responded with a chuckle. "By the way, she called you Papa, so I'm assuming you're the owner? You seem so young?" "I do own this place, name's Izuku Midoriya, and I adopted Arie 5 years ago. Now as to why I work here is because I need to pay the bills for our home upstairs and food for me and Arie." "But doesn't your mother worry about you working?" Izuku paused for a second. His smile seemed to drop a little. Aizawa assumed some bad memories came back, before answering. "She's dead. She died when I was 14 from a villain attack. They couldn't save her and my father walked out on us a long time ago." He paused there while looking down as they took in the information he gave them. "That's why I want to be a hero," Izuku continued. "Not only to say it doesn't matter what quirk you have and that you can be a hero, but also so no one will grow up without their parents." He smiled while running his hand through Arie's hair. "The only problem I have is that, at the moment, I don't have anyone to look after Arie and she can't go into school by herself because she has no control over her quirk. I've tried but nothing worked. I was hoping to contact Nizu or a member of U.A's staff to possibly set something up when the time came to at least take the exam." They talked some more before eventually leaving so he could close down. As they walked out, Aizawa could see his comrades' faces that held both respect yet pity for the young father, as did him, but as they walked Hisashi turned to them. "Do you think we could talk to Nizu? I mean, he might understand his situation and allow him to take the young girl with him." "But what about if he gets in?" Namuri asked. "She'll need to be in his class, not only that but with heroics, homework and a myriad of other classes. Alongside looking after a kid, he might be more exhausted than Shota." While he hated the comparison Namuri had used, Aizawa did have to agree. "I do agree, but he does seem to understand this and is willing to balance his plate, but I do think we should talk with Nizu about this," Aizawa explained as the three went their separate ways to do their patrols. It was now Saturday as Izuku and Arie opened up to their customers. The only exception to this was that his only employee had to cancel due to her mother falling ill. Nothing he could really do besides give her some time off and wish her well. As Izuku finished up with one of his regulars, a detective with short black hair and somewhat rectangular black eyes. He's normally in his uniform when he comes round, which consists of a tan overcoat and matching hat, underneath which he wears a black suit, a green tie at his neck with matching slacks and dress shoes. That was when Arie came to him in her little chef outfit and pulled on his pants leg. "Papa, there's a man on the phone who wants to talk with you. He said it was important." Curious, he went to the back where the wall-mounted phone was. Maybe it's a pre-order? Walking to the phone, Izuku picked it up to answer. "Hi, you've reached the Happy Hero Cafe. Izuku Midoriya speaking. How may I help you?" Mr. Midoriya, it's a pleasure. I am Principal Nizu of U.A, and it has come to my attention, by some of my staff members, that you have a little predicament when it comes to the entrance exam and possibly getting into U.A in a year. Am I correct? Nizu spoke in a calm yet chipper tone as he spoke. "Why, yes, sir, I do. You see, I have a child with me who I can't find anyone to look after when I take the exam, and if I get into U.A, that she might not be allowed to come with me." Izuku stated, trying to stay calm, but really was a nervous wreck, which got a chuckle out of both Arie and Nizu. After the principal composed himself, he continued, "Well, why don't you come to my office tomorrow so we could discuss this further?" To say Izuku was shocked was an understatement. His current school only allowed Arie to come begrudgingly, and here is the principal of U.A was willing to come to a compromise? It was really a breath of fresh air. Thank you, Principal Nizu, sir. Will that be all?" There was silence from Nizu, but he did hear a few murmurs through the phone. After a couple minutes of this, Nizu's voice came back and asked, "Could it be possible to place an order for 4 boxes of cookies? 10 of each type if possible for tomorrow?" "Right away, sir. And thank you for choosing the Happy Hero." After the phone call, Izuku and Arie were very busy making the best damn cookies they could make to give to Nizu and the staff tomorrow. Spending some good father-daughter time always did put a smile on both hers and Izuku's faces. Chapter 2. "Are you sure you can handle it?" "Yes, Izuku, I can handle the cafe by myself. It's not my first time. Remember when you were sick?" "I know, Kyoka, but it doesn't stop me from worrying." Izuku was currently talking to his best and only employee, Kyoka Jiru. She started working with him 2 years ago and became one of Izuku's closest friends. It also helped that she didn't judge him on his quirk, plus Arie liked her, so it was a plus. The reason why he was worried wasn't because he had no faith in her skills, quite the opposite in fact. No, it was because Friday was one of their most busy days. He was worried in case she would be overworked and left exhausted. "I'll be fine, Izuku. You and Arie just go to U.A already before he changes his mind and your car decides to crap out on you again," Kyoka said, ushering him out to the awaiting car. Izuku sighed. "Fine, just promise me if things get too much, call me, okay?" "I promise, now go! Before you're late!" "Bye, Miss Kyoka!" Arie waved from their car's window, a green 1970 Dodge Charger with a black roof, 2 black stripes down hood and a black stripe across the back. He found it rotting in a beach that was turned into an illegal dumping ground. He found someone who could fix it up and could replace the parts it needed, but being from the pre-quirk area, it wasn't cheap, but it was worth it, seeing Arie's smile when they first took it for a drive. Kyoka watched them drive off to U.A with a slight bit of jealousy. She wanted to go see U.A for the first time together, but she recognized that this was important for both of them. As she watched the car fade into the distance before walking back to the cash register, that was until, "You know," Kyoka yelped and spun around only to be met with her mother. "Are you going to finally ask him out?" Mika asked with a smirk. "Wow, Mom! How did you even get in here without me hearing you?" Kyoka screamed, her earphone jacks flailing out of control. "A mother has her ways, Kyoka," Mika said with a matter-of-fact tone. "How do you know he likes me too?" Kyoka asked insecurely. "I'm not really as gifted as other girls." "Kyoka, do you really think that matters to him? And even then, is there some other girl that he has working with him? Or just you? And don't you dare say Arie, she does not count," Mika asked rhetorically. "Just me, but he's also my boss, so," Kyoka muttered shyly. "So just take the leap, Kyoka. That's what your father did with me. And look where that got him, Mika asked with a smile. The idea of having a family with Aiza does sound good, Kyoka thought to herself. Okay, I'll ask him tomorrow. Why tomorrow? We're going to be celebrating our second year of us working together, Kyoka said. Mika grinned teasingly at her daughter. Ah, I see. A little romantic confession? And Mom? Her mother cracked into manic laughter before the front door opened and closed with a giggle, signifying that a customer had arrived. A tall, lanky man came through the door. He had short-cut brown hair and rich blue eyes. He wore a green collar shirt with a black tie and a white overcoat. Kyoka smiled kindly to the man. Good morning, Dr. Crane. I assume you want the usual? She spoke in English. Dr. Jonathan Crane was an American who moved to Japan about a year ago to work in the field of psychiatry. His quirk is similar to Izuku's, causing the two to latch onto each other like a house on fire. His quirk allowed him to see the fears of anyone he touches while making eye contact. Truly a powerful quirk in his line of work. Good morning to you, Ms. Jiru. He spoke with his usual polite smile. Indeed I would, thank you. Right, 1 chicken and lettuce sandwich with mayonnaise and a black coffee to go, coming right up. The drive to U.A felt like a surreal experience, almost like a dream, especially since this will be his first delivery his cafe has ever done. When the U.A entrance came into view, Arie was vibrating with excitement. Like her father, she too had a love for heroes, but Arie mainly liked support and rescue heroes like Recovery Girl and the Wild Hussycats. She liked those specific heroes because she thinks her quirk would be more suitable for those types of heroics. Izuku pulled up to the entrance but was shocked to see Present Mike at the entrance. Hey little listeners! I'm just here to show you to the staff parking lot and escort you two to Nisa's office. Nodding, Izuku followed Mike and drove into the teacher's parking lot and opened the door for Arie to step out so he could get the delivery out of the trunk. When they entered the main building and walked down the halls, Izuku couldn't help but try and remember every little detail. So Arie, Hizashi asked, drawing the attention of the little girl. I wanted to ask this at the cafe, but what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be like Papa. I want to be a hero and save people. Oh, that's sweet. Who's your favorite hero? Either Recovery Girl or the Wild. Arie pouted in frustration, unable to say the team's name without it being a mouthful to her. The Wild Hussycats. Izuku finished what she was trying to say with a chuckle. Yeah. Them. Hizashi chuckled at Arie's enthusiasm but smiled. A lot of support and rescue heroes don't get a lot of attention, unlike a lot of spotlight heroes like him and Midnight. Hell, some underground heroes get more attention than them, so to see a little girl not only look up to and appreciate those heroes but also wanted to be them, it warmed his heart. He also wondered if Recovery Girl would be willing to give her an autograph while Arie was here. As they eventually stood in front of a door, a plaque saying Principal's Office on it, if Izuku was to be honest with himself, he was a bit nervous, not just because he was about to meet Nisa of all people, but because he never had a great reputation with principals, considering Aldera constantly twisting the angle of the situation to be somehow his fault. Present Mike knocked on the door, and after a few seconds of silence they heard the principal telling them, "Come in." With that they opened the door, and what greeted them was the principal himself sitting in his chair, Midnight off to the left of him. Eraserhead was on the couch with none other than Recovery Girl herself. Arie was giddy at seeing the old heroine but held herself back from asking for an autograph from her after reminding herself why they were here. Ah, the Midoriyas! Welcome! Please, have a seat. Nisa gestured to the empty chair in front of his desk. Izuku immediately sat down and put Arie in his lap, Hizashi moving to stand on the right of the principal. Pardon Recovery Girl being here, she's just here to help with an injury Eraserhead sustained. So, you have a problem with taking the exam, and if you get in, your daughter might not be able to join you, am I correct? Yes, sir, Izuku confirmed with a nod. You see, Arie can't control her quirk, no matter what we try. The only way to shut it off is to let it run its course, and it gives her a high fever in the process. Izuku would have left it there, but with a smirk he looked down at his daughter. Which is bad considering she wants to be a hero like Recovery Girl. He couldn't help but bring that up to embarrass his daughter in front of one of her idols. And he got the reaction he wanted from her. Arie became as red as a tomato and hid her face from the world in his chest while punching it over and over, calling him a meanie. He could also see Recovery Girl chuckling at the scene in front of her, but he could see gratitude in her eyes. Nizu also chuckled at the father-daughter moment in front of him but recomposed himself to get back on topic. I think we can come to an arrangement. When the exam comes around, for the written exam Arie will stay with the exam proctor until you're done. As for the practical, she will sit with you while the rules are explained, but when that's over she will be escorted to the viewing booth with us. Finally, if you get in, she will be allowed to join you in classes, but when quirk training comes around she will also receive training with Eraserhead here. He gestured to the man who looked ready to pass out where he sat. I can work with that, sir. But even if you fail the exam, I still want you to bring young Arie here so she can still receive quirk training. Nizu continued. Eraserhead nodded at the statement. It would be logical to train her on how to use her quirk in a safe environment, and with me present, so then we don't have any accidental misfires. Izuku had to agree. Even if he couldn't be a hero, he would be damned if he took that chance away from his daughter. Even if I can't be a hero, I won't let Arie's chances be squandered by me. Nizu couldn't help but smile and appreciate the conviction of the young father before him. Well, if with that done, why don't Midnight and Mike give you two a tour and drop off the boxes in the teacher's lounge? Thank you, sir, but if you don't mind, where are the restrooms? Down the hall, first right. Thank you, sir. I'll be back in a minute, Arie. Izuku kissed Arie on the horn, electing a giggle from his daughter and a coo from Midnight, and took his leave. When the door closed, Arie's smile dropped into a frown. Noticing this, Nizu turned to the young girl. Is everything all right, young Arie? Are you a hero, Mr. Nizu? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because if you are, can you help Papa? Her question took the heroes back a bit, as they wondered why would this young girl ask if Nizu was a hero. Yes, I am. I don't see as much action as I used to, but I still have my license. Is something the matter with him? Papa won't talk about it, but he's hurt. Her voice was starting to wobble and tears threatened to spill as she held her head down. People hurt Papa because they think his quirk is for a villain, one person more so than others. He thinks I don't hear him being beaten up and the things said to him, but I do. I don't understand some of them, but it hurts seeing Papa hurt. The heroes' hearts clenched while hearing this young girl's heart break. And I feel useless when we get home and he thinks I'm asleep, he cries. I don't know what Papa does, but when I see him and hug his arm, it always flinches. Red flags immediately popped up at the implications. Recovery Girl more so than the others. Arie finally looked up to Nizu. Please help Papa. Nizu was silent while he took in the information. This little girl asked him to help her father when he tried to hide that he was in pain. He'd be a fool and an awful hero if he turned them away. I will, Arie, you have my word that I will help young Izuku. Now you said there were things that were said that you didn't understand. What might some of those be? Arie thought for a moment, recoiling a beating that happened a week ago. What does it mean to take a swan dive off the roof? Izuku, Arie, Midnight, and Nizu walked to the teacher's parking lot after they gave them a tour of the school. Arie was currently clutching 2 pieces of paper close to her chest with the biggest smile on her face. The reason for this was because on those pieces of paper were autographs from both Recovery Girl and 13. He couldn't help but remember the last time she smiled like that when he got her some limited edition Wild Hussycats, water hoses, and backdraft figures for her birthday last year. As they neared the car, Namiri let out a low whistle. Man, that's a nice car. Where'd you get it? Papa found it on a beach and fixed it. Izuku chuckled and rubbed the back of his head. Arie loved that car, and whenever someone asked about it, she was always enthusiastic about it. Technically, I didn't. I paid someone to fix it because of its pre-quirk area construction and parts. Still, it's pretty sweet. Izuku opened the passenger door for Arie to step in and buckled her up before he felt a tap on his lead. Looking down, he saw the principal looking at him with his usual polite smile. I do hope you have a safe journey back, young Izuku. I might have to visit your cafe sometime if your company was any indication today. Thank you, Nizu, sir. It was nice being here in your company as well. And thank you for both the tour and the whole situation with me and Arie. Nonsense, I'm happy to help wherever I can. Now be safe on your travels. With that, Izuku drove off, leaving Nisa and Midnight watching the car fade into the distance. So, what are we doing with the whole situation with them? After what Arie said, I doubt you're going to let it slide. It wasn't so much as a question but more of an observation on her part after working with him for so long. Good heavens no, if there's one thing that bristles my fur it's quirk discrimination, let alone someone potentially sacrificing their own mental health to keep up the illusion of being fine to keep one's family happy. Namuri couldn't help the shiver as she looked into his eyes. I sense a Nisa plan forming and I don't know if I like it. The manic laughter from the rodent principal didn't ease her worry and prayed for that boy's school for the hell that they just unknowingly unleashed. When Izuku and Arie got back to the cafe, the sun was just starting to set. Both of them were greeted by the sight of Kyoka cleaning the cafe's tables when they entered the door. Looking up, she gave both of them a soft smile. Hey Arie, hey Izuku, how'd it go? Better than expected. He said that if I get in, Arie would be allowed to come with me and that she would receive quirk training with Eraserhead. And I got autographs from both Recovery Girl and 13. Kyoka couldn't help but giggle at Arie's excitement over getting an autograph from some of her idols. The sight alone of Arie's smile was enough to brighten the room. That's wonderful, Arie, she replied enthusiastically. How about you go upstairs and while I talk to Izuku more and then you can tell me all about your trip to U.A, okay? Okay, Miss Kyoka, Arie said as she ran upstairs. Izuku moved towards Kyoka, smiling at the direction his daughter ran off in. Did anything else happen at U.A I should know about? Only that if I failed that I should still bring Arie for quirk training. Apart from that, nothing Arie isn't dying to tell you. That's good to hear. Are we still on for tomorrow? Izuku gave her a smile. Of course. How can we not celebrate our second year of us working together? Come on, if we don't hurry up Arie will come down and drag us up there. Kyoka followed Izuku up the stairs leading to the home above the cafe with a smile. She couldn't wait for tomorrow to tell Izuku how she felt towards him. She just hopes he feels the same about her. Chapter 3. Ugh, thank goodness school's over. Kyoka groaned. Izuku chuckled in amusement. School had just got out for both of them and Kyoka and Arie were walking towards the mall so that they could celebrate their second year of working together. None were more excited to get to the mall than Arie, but that was due to the high she was still on from meeting some of her idols when they visited Yui yesterday. So where are we doing to celebrate? Izuku asked. Kyoka looked at both Izuku with Arie on his shoulders with a smirk causing Izuku to deadpan her. You still aren't gonna tell us, are you? Izuku groaned. Nope, Kyoka replied as her smirk turned into a teasing grin. Curse you! Why must you hurt us this way, Miss Kyoka? The purplet laughed evilly at the father and daughter duo's dismay. After getting her laughter under control, she looked at the two with a warm smile. In all seriousness, I want it to be a surprise for all of us. Besides, you two are gonna love what I have planned for you. That got the two's interest and Arie leaned down to her father's ear and they started mumbling what she might have planned for them and if their surprise would be on par with what she planned. Where are we going anyway? Izuku asked as he was being pulled along. Arie had dismounted from his shoulders when they arrived and was currently also being dragged along by Kyoka. You'll see soon enough. It's on the second level, so come on, Kyoka replied, continuing to tug on his arm. You must be pretty excited about it if you're pulling Papa this much, Miss Kyoka. It's not me that's gonna be excited about it, Kyoka said, affixing Arie with a clever smile. Her plan was going just as planned. She called ahead to reserve a hero collectible that was released just recently before it went out of stock. Her crush and his daughter were disappointed when it went out of stock when it first released, so she knew they'd be overjoyed when she got it for them. And when we go and get lunch, I can finally admit my feelings for him, and we can finally go out, Kyoka thought, her smile turning clever for a moment before returning to her excited one. Come on, Kyoka, where are we, huh? Izuku, Arie and Kyoka switched places as he and Arie rushed ahead of her and started pulling her along to the nearby hero store. Kyoka laughed at the sudden change in their demeanor, letting them pull her into the store they were heading towards. It was a hero store that they frequented many times before. It was wall to wall with hero merchandise ranging from the most popular hero around, Almight, to the more obscure heroes like the international rescue hero team the Thunderbirds, who just debuted that year and was making a steady rise through the ranks. As was tradition by now, Izuku and Arie had released Kyoka's hands to dart around the shop searching for anything new they could possibly buy. It always amused her at how much of a hero nerd they were. Like father, like daughter, I guess, Kyoka thought. Eventually they returned to her side with a disappointed sigh. Darn, no new collectibles, Izuku muttered, Arie just as downcast as her father. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure, Kyoka replied with a smile. Oh? Izuku and Arie watched as Kyoka walked over to the front desk and spoke to the man. He nodded with a smile before he took out 2 boxes they were unfamiliar with. Both their eyes instantly lit up as they saw the writing on them. International Rescue Thunderbirds / Diecast Complete Set. Ryukyu Dark Shroud Costumes / Limited Edition. Kyoka caught the father and daughter's excited expression and smirked, paying for what she had ordered and walking over to them, who got even more excited as she got closer. As she finally stopped in front of them both, Izuku was hopping slightly on his feet, while Arie was practically vibrating. If not for the fact that they look nothing alike, one would be hard-pressed to say that they weren't released. The similarities caused Kyoka to giggle fondly at their antics. Kyoka handed Izuku and Arie the boxes, which they were quick to open up to inspect the contents. Inside of Izuku's was an action figure of the Dragoon hero, Ryukyu, in a black and red version of her hero suit. Arie's was contained a set of 5 vehicles. The first was a small silver and blue rocket ship with a white number 1 near the boosters. The second was a large green ship with the number 2 on its back fin in white. The third was a massive red rocket ship with a white number 3 on the bottom. The fourth was of a small yellow submarine with a black 4 in the middle sides of its hull, and lastly was a space station with a golden ring around it, and the number 5 in white on the docking port. All of the machines had the words Thunderbird somewhere along their hulls. The father and daughter duo stared at their gifts with starry eyes and wide smiles on their faces. The unique Ryukyu Dark Shroud costume! That only had 100 copies made! I was on the edge of my seat when I watched that part, Izuku gushed excitedly. Careful, Zu, you might run out of breath, Kyoka teased. But it's just so awesome! You got me the Thunderbirds? Arie asked excitedly, her big ruby eyes staring at Kyoka like she just gave her a room full of sweets. Of course I did, Snowball. Kyoka and Izuku smiled at the white-haired girl, and she looked at the 5 metal vehicles with a smile so bright that both Kyoka and Izuku had to squint, but what she blurted out took both of them by surprise. Thank you, Mama! 3 words, just 3 words broke Izuku and Kyoka. Despite the noise of the shop, both Kyoka and Izuku couldn't hear anything from the outside world, Arie's words replying over and over in their heads and sporting nuclear levels of blushes on their faces. Arie also sported a massive blush on her face as she just caught what just left her mouth. I am as sorry, Miss Kyoka, it just slipped out. After getting a grip of herself, Kyoka saw that Arie was scared that she might have offered her in some way. It actually warmed her heart that not only was the little girl considering how others may have taken her words, but also for the fact that she saw her as her mother. If Izuku returns my feelings, then I know I'm not stepping on any toes with Arie, Kyoka thought. Let's go get something to eat before we talk about what happened. With a nod from both, they set off to find a place to eat. When they found one nearby, they ordered some food and sat at a booth where they sat in silence. It was unbearable for both Izuku and Arie for different reasons. Arie was nervous because, just like her father, she didn't want anyone to get hurt, so when her mouth betrayed her, she thought that she might have offered Kyoka in some way. She didn't want to lose the only person who was her only mother figure. Izuku was nervous because he was scared of losing his only employee, but most importantly his only friend. He didn't want to go back to it just being him and Arie against the world. Having Kyoka there made some days less dark. After a few moments of silence, Kyoka spoke. So, I want to get this out of the way. I'm not mad that Arie called me Mama. Izuku and Arie visibly relaxed, releasing a breath that they had no clue that they were holding. But it does make this slightly easier. Kyoka looked away from Izuku as she felt her face heating up. When I joined the cafe, it was because I wanted this new drum set because my last one broke. Mom and Dad offered to buy me a new one, but I wanted to earn it by working, so when I saw your help wanted sign, I thought I'd work part-time then leave when I got my money. She looked back at Izuku with a small smile. But what I didn't expect was to actually like working there and having fun doing it. I liked working with you and Arie and making orders for the customers, and over time I realized that it wasn't so much the cafe but you, Izuku. I like spending time with you. Hearing you laugh and helping you raise Arie were some of the best 2 years of my life. Ugh, what I am trying to say is, I love you, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku just stared her in stunned silence, clearly trying to process the information Kyoka just delivered, but his hack of response made some of Kyoka's insecurities bubble to the surface. Look, I getting it if you don't feel dash. She was cut off by Izuku's laughter. She was confused why he was laughing. Excuse me one moment, Kyoka. He left the booth, so it was just her and Arie. She watched him leave before entering a music store, which caused the snow-haired child to gasp before entering a fit of giggles. She was further confused by the young one's reaction, but she saw Izuku leaving the store holding something. When he got back to the booth was when he gave the object to her. It was a royal purple electric guitar. On the guitar it was the signature of one of her favorite bands, Deep Dupe. She then further recognized it as one of only 60 copies that were sold with their signature. But on its nick were 2 notes reading, Happy 2 years, Miss Kyoka. Arie. And, Dear Kyoka, happy 2 years. I know you may not like me in this way, but I've had feelings for you for a while now, so could you make me the happiest man in Japan and go out with me? Izuku. Kyoka's heart swelled with both joy, happiness, and love that these two managed to get her this marvelous gift, and that Izuku shared her feelings. Without thinking, she stood up, walked to Izuku, and kissed him passionately. When they separated, they looked at each other with both happiness, relief, and love as onyx eyes stared into emerald pools. They were only broken out of their gaze when, by a tug of their shirts, they looked to see Arie looking at Kyoka with a look of both nervousness and hopeful excitement. Mama? Tears welded in the purplet's eyes as she picked up the white-haired child and smiled at her. Yeah, Arie. I'll be your mama. Arie gave them a blinding smile as she attempted to hug both her father and her new mother. Izuku and Kyoka chuckled at her attempt and hugged her back and each other. Nothing could ruin this moment for the new family. It was now Thursday. A full 2 days had passed since he and Kyoka confessed their love for each other. Honestly, Izuku was still getting used to the whole situation, that he now had a girlfriend, a frickin' girlfriend. How could he not be, the girl of his dreams, confused that she loved him too? Arie was just happy that her father was happy, and she now had a mama. But sadly, things at Aldera didn't seem to want to give him and his daughter a break. Things just seemed to have gotten worse when he arrived at school, and the bullying from others seemed to have amped up. Apparently a few of the girls from his class were having a girls' day out, and spotted him and Kyoka kissing and spread it around the school. The only good thing he got was that during lunch he received a text from Kyoka saying that school ended early because a villain crashed into the school and decided to open the cafe early. After lunch, Izuku was sitting in class with Arie on his lap, trying to do his work while trying to ignore the whispering, slandering remarks against his new girlfriend by the female population of class and the malicious stares that signified a beat down later from the men in the room. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door before it opened, revealing 4 people standing at the door. To the shock of both Arie and Izuku, the people standing there were 3 they recognized and 1 they didn't. The first person he recognized was one of his customers, a man with short black hair and somewhat rectangular black eyes. He wore a tan overcoat and matching hat, underneath which he was wearing a black suit, a green tie at his neck with matching slacks and dress shoes, Naomasa Tsukachi if he remembered correctly. The second was Eraserhead, with the third person being Nizu himself sitting in the Pro Heroes capture gear, both of which were scanning the room until their gaze landed on the father and daughter duo. Arie gave a small wave towards Nizu and Eraserhead, which Nizu returned for the both of them. The last person neither Izuku nor Arie recognized, a man with a lean build, large yellow eyes, and the head of a ginger tabby cat. He wore a pale blue button-up shirt with a protective vest over the top, and was dressed like most police force members, with the exception of a golden bell at his neck. All noise in the classroom ceased upon the reveal of the 4 that was until Nizu cleared his throat. Pardon the interpretation, but me and my associates were here to pick up a person that has piqued our interest. And just like that, everyone looked towards a very smug-looking Katsuki Bakugo as the teacher spoke. I knew our star student would get on UA's radar, sir. He is a diligent student. That he is, Nizu agreed, But as Bakugo was about to stand, Niza spoke with just as much of a smug grin and the blonde had. Could Izuku Midoriya and Arie Midoriya please follow me to the car? We have a lot to discuss. And just like before, all noise was erased when Niza finished his sentence. After a moment, Izuku got up, holding Arie in his arms, and walked towards the door as everyone started screaming, one in particular. Why the buck would you want bucking villain Deku instead of an actual hero? When Izuku and Arie got to the door, Niza jumped out of Eraserhead's scarf as the pro escorted both Arie and Izuku out. Once they were out of earshot, Niza turned his gaze upon the blonde. I am choosing an actual hero. Niza then turned his loom to the two remaining people. Detective Naomi Satsukachi, offender Sansa Tamakawa. I'll leave this situation in both your and Eraserhead's capable hands. With a nod from the detective and officer, Niza made his leave. As he arrived at the black car, he could see that Arie and Izuku were situated in the back ready to go. That will be all, Eraserhead. Aizawa nodded at his boss before head to the school building once more. Once Niza got in the front passenger seat, he looked towards the driver of the vehicle. Take us to Midoriya's cafe, please, Midnight. And with that, Midnight drove off towards the cafe. The ride was in relative silence, with the only sound was from Izuku typing on his phone alerting Kyoka of what was happening, and Arie who dug through their bag to eat a spare apple they packed in case their food was stolen. When they arrived at the cafe, everyone got out of the car and Izuku led them through the cafe's door so Kyoka knew that they arrived. Izuku, are you okay? What happened? She asked as he led everyone behind the counter. I don't know, but I think I'm about to find out. Kyoka sighed but gave him a peck on the cheek. Be safe. With a nod and a reassuring smile, Izuku made his way up into the apartment above the cafe. Entering the upstairs apartment, Izuku was greeted with Niza sitting on Midnight's lap and Arie sitting opposite them, talking about any and all things Thunderbirds related while showing off the gift Kyoka got her. Nervously, Izuku walked to sit next to his daughter while constantly thinking what was happening. Maybe's they're retracting the offer they gave? Maybe's they're suing because one of the staff got food poisoning or an allergic reaction. Maybe dash. I can assure you that none of my staff have fallen ill due to the confectionery you brought to our school when you visited, and our agreement still stands, Niza said, causing Izuku to do an impression of a tomato due to being caught mumbling. Thought Lunch Rush was quite impressed by your baking skills and extends an offer himself that if you don't make it into the hero course, you're more than welcome to join him in the cafeteria. Please tell him that I appreciate the offer. Now Midoriya, Midnight could. Who was that lovely girl working the front desk? Before a blushing Izuku could answer, Arie spoke with excitement. That's my new mama. She's been working with us for 2 years and also wants to be a hero. Kyoka will also be taking the UA entrance exam, Izuku explained. If something important me and Kyoka have to do together that Arie can't go to, Kyoka's parents, Mika and Kyoto Kujiro, would babysit her, but when the exam starts they'll be at work. Right, now I believe we should really get to the reason for this meeting, Niza said as he clapped his paws to get everyone's attention. Now UA prides itself on producing the next best heroes. That is why we have a zero-tolerance policy. But we know that not everyone can be perfect, so when we get something that might be forged, we do some investigating. Niza gestured for Midnight. She reached in a bag and produced a brown folder and handed it to Izuku. We found cases of quirkless behavior and forging documents from Aldera, which you know is highly illegal, and over 200 incidents while in middle school alone of Katsuki Bakugo's assault on you. This is not the type of hero we at UA want to produce, so as of today Aldera and its students will be under investigation. Izuku was floored by the news. He expected UA to treat things differently and with more class, but he never expected them to go this far for someone who wasn't even a student. How? He asked weakly. It wasn't Niza or Midnight that answered him, but the shuffling from the little girl next to him, and he heard her speak in the littlest voice he had ever heard from her. I'm sorry, Papa. I didn't want him to hurt you again. I'm sorry. Izuku wrapped his daughter in a hug as he felt his shirt getting wet. It's okay, Arie. I'm not mad, just confused and shocked. Young Arie brought this to our attention the day you two came to UA, Midnight admitted. She said some things that brought some concerns, not just with the school but also you. Izuku Midoriya, may I please see your arms? Niza asked. Izuku sighed and rolled up his sleeves to show to his guests. Both his arms were littered with scars and deep cuts from his wrist all the way up his forearm, just stopping shy of his elbow. He didn't want to admit it, but he was scared. He was scared that they may take Arie away from him, that they may deny him entry into UA due to this. Scars can tell stories, and yours is one of neglect and abuse from your peers, Iza said while touching his own scar. But they can be what push you to do amazing things and be a light. Niza got off Midnight's lap and stood on the coffee table to face Izuku properly. Under normal circumstances, people who want to enter UA have to complete high school to attend, but as you guessed, these are not normal circumstances. If you accept, Midnight herself proposed that she is willing to come here to your home and teach you until it is time for the exam. This was the second time today Izuku was floored. Midnight, a pro hero, is willing to come to his home and teach him what he should instead of attending Aldera. There was only one option he could choose. I graciously accept your offer. Chapter 4. A week has passed since Nemuri offered to teach Izuku at his home instead of him going to that Reach school. She still feared the jovial gleam in Niza's eyes when they were told that Detective Tsukachi was more than glad to assist in the information of Aldera. She had her suspicions on why he didn't need much convincing when asked who they're the targets of the potential quirk discrimination, but let it slide for now. She was glad that she was able to come to Izuku's cafe almost daily. Nemuri will never get tired of what they make at this little cafe. She was also greatly surprised when she learned that both Izuku and Arie were quick learners and were never afraid to ask if they were confused on something. But one day she was asked a question that she should have seen coming. She was taking a break in the dining room from the morning teaching the duo when Izuku walked towards the table she was sitting at and looked at her. Why are you doing this? What do you mean, Midoriya? Nemuri asked, confused with the sudden question. Why go out of your way to teach us when I could have taken an online class? Why take time out of your day to help me when you barely know me? He continued as he sat down opposite her. Now Nemuri understood the question. She closed her eyes and sighed as he put down her coffee on the table. I may not know you specifically, but I did know your mother and your father. This shocked Izuku that her Nemuri Kiyama, aka Pro Hero Midnight, knew his mother and father. We were friends during our time in high school. Nemuri continued to explain. She introduced me to her other friends. I think their names were Mitsuki, Masaru, and if I am remembering correctly, and Hisashi. If I'm honest with you, I never had a good feeling about Hisashi, but Inko was happy, so I left it. With a sigh, she looked down, not wanting to face the boy in front of her. I lost contact with Inko after graduating from UA, but when I got wind of a villain attacking Muzurifu, I had this gut-sinking feeling that something was wrong. When it was all said and done, we were tasked to help collect the corpses. That's when I found Inko. She looked up to look at her deceased friend's son as her eyes stung with tears that threatened to spill. She couldn't exactly see his eyes due to his hair covering them, but the tear marks on his face were a good indication of his emotions. After some minutes of silence, Izuku's voice broke the silence, though barely due to how quiet and soft it was. WH. Why didn't I know this? Why? Why did Mom not say anything? It was heart-wrenching for Nemuri, but it was the final statement that twisted the knife in her heart. Why didn't you look for me? She couldn't take it anymore and got up to sit next to the boy and wrap him in a hug, letting his tears soak into her shirt. I did try to find you when I found out that Inko had a son, but your father didn't exactly make it easy for me to do so. Why would I care where a villain is, I believe is what he said. She let a finger rest under his chin and tilted it up to look at her. I failed your mother when I couldn't protect her when that villain attacked. Me and the other heroes failed to stop that villain when he escaped. I failed to find you in time and let you live a normal teenage life. Why am I doing this? Because I failed you and Inko so many times that I am not letting this slip through my fingers again. Izuku let his head rest in the crook of Nemuri's neck and enjoyed the warm and comforting embrace the woman was giving him. The last time he remembered a hug like this was with his mother all those years ago. It felt nice to be held like that again. After a moment for both to calm down, Izuku reluctantly pulled away from the hug and looked at an equally red-eyed Midnight. Thank you, Ms. Midnight. I needed that. Nemuri ruffled Izuku's mop of green hair in amusement, Izuku himself unconsciously leaning into her touch. You got nothing to worry about, Izuku, and please call me Nemuri when I'm not working. She laughed when she saw the faintest hint of an embarrassed blush. Also, someone will be coming over tomorrow to help teach you. That caught his attention and took his mind off being on first-name basis with a pro hero. Who is it, and why are they coming over? Well, when I told her about you, your situation, and what I'm doing, she kind of insisted of helping you with the quote of, "You're bad at teaching math, Namiri." So she asked Nizu if she could help. Namiri smiled fondly. Also, she's my wife. Izuku was currently sitting with Arie in the cafe area waiting for Namiri and her wife. It was still strange to Izuku that his own mother knew a pro hero like Midnight, and said pro hero was now privately teaching him, and his daughter with her wife now wanting to be added into the mix. This line of thought crossed Izuku's mind since he was told yesterday. Who was Namiri's wife? Was it another pro hero? A civilian? Whoever they were, he was glad that they were making Midnight happy. The sound of a ringing from the front door opening caught his attention as he looked to see Namiri, and next to her was who he presumed was her wife. She was a slightly shorter woman, maybe an inch in Izuku's opinion. She was fair-skinned with a slender build just like Midnight standing on her right. Her hair fell to just below her ears, seemingly black, but when light struck at just the right spot, it shined like a galaxy. Her eyes were that same color, practically glittering like stars. Haruki, this is Izuku and Arie Midoriya. Izuku, Arie, this is my wife Haruki Kiyama. Namiri said excitedly. She seemed to have been waiting for this meeting to happen, but under that excitement seemed to be a glint of annoying smile and teasing in her eyes. Haruki smiled at the pair as she extended her hand. Nice to see you two again. That voice. It seemed familiar to Izuku, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Apparently they had met before, but where? His answers would be answered by his own daughter. That voice. She suddenly gasped and pointed with a look of pure excitement. You're 13. Haruki, or 13 as his daughter pointed out, giggled at the white-haired child's enthusiasm. My, that didn't take long for you to figure things out, did it, Arie? Arie blushed at the praise that her idol gave her, and that she outed herself on that she was such a nerd that she could recognize the pro from just her voice. Izuku chuckled at his daughter's reaction to what she did and couldn't help but have sympathy for her, considering he was close to figuring out her from her voice also. Izuku took Haruki's offered hand and shook it. It's nice to meet you again too, Mrs. Kiyama. Haruki just waved him off. Please just call me Haruki, Izuku. I was about to start breakfast for me and Arie. Would you two like to join us? Izuku offered the two women in front of him as Arie, being her eternal adorable self, was bouncing at the idea of having breakfast with her hero. Haruki turned back to Izuku and smiled gratefully. That sounds lovely, Izuku, thank you. Izuku nodded as he gestured towards the staircase that was leading to the house on top. Once they were in and settled at the table, Izuku went to start breakfast. Taking advantage of the table and kitchen being so close, he decided to ask a question. So you mentioned that you and Namiri started dating in your second year. But how did you meet and get to where you are now? That was during the entrance exam. Haruki sighed fondly as she took her wife's hand. It feels like yesterday when we met. It all started when a young Haruki had just finished destroying a group of 3-pointers. It wasn't long since the exam started, and already a lot of people were getting high points. Haruki wasn't really focused on fighting the villains and was more focused on helping the other examiners. Not to say she didn't have any villain points, but they weren't her primary focus. She was just about to leave to go to another area when she heard a loud thunk and looked to see someone just got smacked by a 1-pointer. Haruki rushed over and activated her quirk to destroy the 1-pointer with the force of black hole. The metal of the machine bent, cracked, and ripped itself apart from her quirk. With not even a trace of the machine left, the future space hero rushed over to help her fellow examinee. Are you alright? Her gaze fell upon a tall, curvaceous woman with sky-blue eyes, which tilted downwards in the center, framed by a set of rather long eyelashes. She had abundant spiky dark purple hair which was made up of layers of varying lengths, the longest ones reaching down below her waist. Her chin-length bangs were split into 3 sections, 2 swept to the sides and 1 over her face, going diagonally down to the left between her eyes. She also had a small beauty mark below her left eye, as well as red-painted nails. Haruki would admit later when they got together that when she first laid eyes on her now wife Namiri took her breath away. Yeah, I'm fine. She spoke before looking at Haruki with a grateful smile. Thanks for taking out that bot for me. Name's Namuri Kayama. You. Haruki Anakuro. And from there we became friends and eventually where we are now. Haruki finished her story with a smile as she squeezed her wife's hand, Namuri smiling at her space hero softly as she retold the memory of how they first met. After we got our acceptance letters we found out that we were in the class, Namuri softly said. We moved into the university's dorms the first chance we got, and were practically glued to the hip. Izuku smiled at the story between the two heroes in front of him. His gaze briefly wandered to Arie and saw the joy on her face on how they got together before turning it back to the two. That was an amazing story. And I'm happy for you too, truly. Why thank you, Izuku, Haruki said with a giggle. Now, Izuku hummed, trying to find the right words to his guest. Not to seem disrespectful or anything, but why do you want to help Haruki? Are you also a friend of my mom? No, my boy, it's alright, and no, I wasn't a friend of Inko. No, I'm here because I wanted to help teach you considering that my dear Namuri isn't as great in some subjects. I'm not that bad, Haruki. You barely passed the exams at UE by the skin of your teeth, and that's because you flirted with anything that moved, and anything that didn't. Namuri opened her mouth to counter-argue before closing it as her wife did have somewhat of a point. But it stopped when we started dating in our second year. Yes, and that's because while you can dish them out you couldn't take them, and every time you didn't study I would flirt and tease you till you got back to work. Midnight blushed and turned away with a playful pout. I'm not that bad, she grumbled. Everyone at the table laughed at the R-rated hero's expense. Even Arie was giggling away at the grown woman, which caused her to pout further. After getting her laughter under control, Haruki looked to Izuku. Now Izuku, if you don't mind satisfying my curiosity, why did you open a cafe? No, Haruki, it's fine, Izuku said as his smile dropped into a one of sadness. It was a dream of mine if I never made it into the heroics industry, kind of a backup plan. But once Mom died I had no income, so I scoured the internet and found this place. My Aunt Mitsuki, Katsuki's mom, tried to adopt me, but after I told both her and Uncle Masaru what was going on, they thought it would be best not to have me and Katsuki under the same roof. Izuku explained and saw Namuri's reaction of recognition to his honorary aunt and uncle's names. I don't regret it because otherwise I won't have Arie with me, he says while patting the snow-haired child's head, much to her pleasure. Haruki and Namuri smiled at the father and daughter duo in front of them, a small thought of something the two women had discussed about recently before either of them met Izuku or Arie. Pushing those thoughts for another day, Namuri spoke. Okay, Izuku, Arie, now that everybody's had breakfast, how about after we clean the plates we get started on your lessons today? With a nod from the both of them, they got up and headed to the kitchen to clean the plates while Namuri and Haruki looked at each other with the same thought passed through their heads. You think we can adopt Izuku? Chapter 5. Ever since Haruki joined Namuri in teaching a few months back, both Izuku and Arie things have gotten a bit more lively. For starters, when Namuri would go off course with her teaching, her wife would always try to steer her back in the right direction. This happened so many times that Izuku and even Arie wondered how the R-rated hero became a teacher. Granted, when she did go off curriculum it was never anything lewd, so Arie wouldn't get corrupted, which Izuku was grateful for because since she had to go to Aldera with him she already picked up some less than savory language by most, mainly by a rabid blonde. He really didn't want her picking up on the adult stuff just yet. He may be the girl's father, but he was not ready to have that conversation just yet with her or ever if he was honest with himself. During breaks they could all be seen chatting to each other, joking, telling stories like how Haruki would sometimes talk about the times she worked with International Rescue on rare occasions, much to Arie's joy. Izuku often embarrassed Arie in front of Haruki at times too by telling her about the white-haired girl's hero rescue shrine that she called her bedroom, and even showed it to her. His daughter kept hitting him in the chest and legs throughout the entire day because of this while pouting adorably, though Haruki did feel honored that she had the most merchandise in the room and was clearly one, if not her most, of her favorite heroes. When the breaks were over, Haruki took over the lessons and proved that her upbeat personality wasn't just a hero persona. She genuinely loved to teach and help people. Sometimes her and Izuku would go into discussions about support equipment, which often got Namuri to make comments saying, And you say I go off track? This would, in turn, get responses from Haruki where she would turn to her wife and say, when I'm off track talking about other things that will actually help the students as heroes, yours would only help them if they are ever with a lover. Nemuri would always huff and look the other way when this occurs, but everyone knew it was in jest, and no had any hard feelings. Nemuri and Haruki would also often spend their time now at the cafe as well, spending so much time Izuku was honestly close to offering them a job there. Izuku's relationship with Kyuka had grown more as the days went on as well. The regular customers noticed this new change in the way Izuku and Kyuka interacted with each other, and would often send them knowing smirks or a thumbs up. Speaking of the two, they were sitting in Izuku's living room and cuddled up near the TV watching the latest news on international rescue for Arie, who was sitting on the floor happily munching on some apple slices while doing so. Hey Izu? Kyuka asked as she munched on some sweets. Yeah, Kyo? Is something wrong? No. Kyuka shook her head before looking up at her boyfriend. I was wondering if we should go on a date tomorrow. Really? Yeah, the cafe would be closed and Mom and Dad would love to spend more time with their new granddaughter. Kyuka smiled at Izuku. So what do you say? I think it's a wonderful idea, Izuku said. We may not get the chance when Yui rolls around. Where do you want to go? Oh, don't worry about that, Green. I know just the place, she said with a predatory smile, causing Izuku to gulp audibly. Why do I feel like I'm going to regret this? Was all he said as Kyuka clutched her stomach laughing. He dropped Arie off at Kyuka's home, the unicorn child running up and wrapping her grandparents in a hug. His head turned to Kyuka and his jaw almost dropped. There standing before him was his wonderful girlfriend dressed in a deep purple dress with a black skirt, a white cloth tied into a bow around her waist, and black high-heeled shoes. When she finally looked up at Izuku, the blush that was already on her face grew double in size. A forest green two-piece suit with a white dress underneath, a red tie around his neck that he would adamantly refuse to tell anyone that his daughter had to tie it for him, and black dress shoes. So how do I look? Kyuka asked, nervousness clear as day in her voice. All Izuku could do was stare at her with his mouth agape and nod dumbly, which caused Mika, Kyotoku and Arie to laugh at his reaction. You might want to close that mouth, Izuku, otherwise the flies will get in, Mika quipped. That seemed to snap Izuku out of his stupor as he shook his head slightly and finally acknowledged his girlfriend's question. Why, you look absolutely stunning, Kyuka. Kyuka blush grew again. She may have gained confidence with being around Izuku, but she still had some confidence issues with her body. But hearing Izuku call her stunning was something her mind still struggled to process despite knowing what type of person Izuku was. She shaped her cheeks lightly and took Izuku's hand before turning to her daughter. We shouldn't be out long, so be good to your grandma and granddad, okay? Kay! Have fun, Mama! Have fun, you too, Mika said with a kind smile. And Izuku! Kyotoku walked up to Izuku and whispered into his ear. We're already grandparents to one child, just don't make us grandparents to any more yet, okay? Without another word, Izuku and Kyuka walked down the street towards their destination. Though Izuku couldn't explain the feeling of dread that washed over him at that moment. As it turned out, Izuku did regret accepting the idea of going on a date with his girlfriend. As they headed off to where Kyuka had planned their date, he did inquire about where they were going, but all he got in response was a smug grin, which did nothing to settle the uneasy feeling in his gut. When they closed in on where their date was going to be, he didn't immediately feel dread at first, because as they approached hand in hand to their destination, he actually relaxed a bit when it was revealed to be a restaurant. They reached the front door. They walked to a nearby empty table. After a moment of waiting, a waitress showed up. Hi, are you two ready to order? Yes, could I have katsudon please with water? Of course, you'd order katsudon, Izuku, Kyuka teased, Izuku rubbing the back of his head with an embedded chuckle. I'd like some American spaghetti and meatballs and water as well, please. Very well, your orders will be here in just a minute, the waitress said before walking off, leaving our couple alone with each other. The waiter took the two menus and left the couple once more. Silence descended upon the couple for a few moments. Then Kyuka opened her mouth. Hey Izu? Kyuka looked down, drawing circles in the tablecloth as she smiled. Do you believe that people are destined to be together? Forever, I mean? She asked, looking back up at him a moment later. Izuku frowned slightly as he stared into the ceiling in thought. He shrugged. I never actually considered it until I met you. Kyuka's heart fluttered as she processed what was said, her smile widening. But now? Izuku trailed off as he looked down at his girlfriend. I think I believe it. Kyuka gave her boyfriend a breathtaking smile, making his chest warm and a smile returned to his face. That's really good. I'd hate it if you didn't think so. I love you, Aizu. I want to stay with you forever. I love you too, Kyo. Here is your food, the waiter said, taking their minds off the current subject by sliding the food and glasses of water in front of them. Thank you, Izuku said with a nod. Do you need anything else? I don't, Kyuka said, shaking her head. Me either. Very well. I will be around if you need anything else. With that, the waiter walked away once more, leaving the two alone again. The two of them remained quiet as they started eating, only resuming after taking a few bites of their food. The food was quite nice as they talked about the week. When the true reason Kyuka chose this place reared its head, there was a stage not far from where they sat, and an employee walked up. All right, everyone. Tonight is our karaoke night. Do we have a volunteer to go first? Izuku felt a cold shiver run down his back after hearing what the employee said. He turned to face his girlfriend's Cheshire, almost bordering on evil, grin. Why, you brought me to a KK karaoke restaurant? Yep. She grinned at him as she popped the pea. I told you I can't sing, Kyuka. Well, too bad, she said with an almost evil chuckle as she pointed to him. He would like to volunteer. He told her throughout the time he's known her that he cannot sing and refused to make a mockery of himself by performing. She tried everything to get him to bend and sing for her, but each time only led to him finding an excuse or something came up for him not to. Evidently his luck finally ran out as he had no way of escaping this. He questioned what he did in either in this life or the previous for this punishment. First lamb to the slaughter, the employee said, which didn't help his current predicament either. Izuku sighed as he accepted his fate. Kyuka knew she won as he stood up to make his way to the stage. Just don't say that I didn't warn you when I say I can't sing. When he made it to the stage, he selected his music of choice and saw Kyuka holding her phone at him, probably wanting whatever blackmail material that will come from this. With a final sigh, he prepared for his fate and took a deep breath as the music started playing. Had to have high hopes for a living. Shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision. Always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living. Didn't know how, but I always had a feeling. I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes. Mama said. Fulfill the prophecy. Be something greater. Go make a legacy. Manifest destiny. Back in the days, we wanted everything. Mama said. Burn your biographies. Always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living. Shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision. Always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living. Didn't know how, but I always had a feeling. I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes. High hopes. When Izuku stopped singing, he was expecting a lot of things. Applause and cheering was not one of them. But their reactions were not what he cared for. The only person's thoughts that mattered was the woman he loved. After handing back the microphone, Izuku walked back to the table and sat back down. He looked up to see his girlfriend's shocked face. After a few moments, she shook off the surprise and looked at him in bewilderment. You said you couldn't sing. The only singing I ever did was for Arie when she was a baby or had nightmares. That was my only experience. Well, you got talent, dude. Kyuka sighed before giving a light chuckle. You do know that now I'm gonna bug you to join both me and Arie in our music lessons, right? I hate you. Kyuka snorted at this and went into an uncontrollable fit of laughter. The sound of her laughing was music to Izuku's ears, and the more he thought about him and his little family playing music together, the more he loved the idea. There was no way this night could get any better. Chapter 6. The date couldn't have gone better in Kyuka's humble opinion. She enjoyed it, but there was one tiny little problem that they faced when they concluded their night and were walking back to her house for Izuku to drop her off and pick up his daughter. It decided to rain. Now Kyuka would love the rain, not so much thunder due to her sensitive hearing, as it would be a calming sound for her, but right now, she despises it for ruining their date. She was soaked to the bone, cold, and her makeup was now running and washing off her face. Izuku wasn't faring any better as his drenched suit weighed heavily on him, though Kyuka would never complain about his dress shirt getting wet to see his toned core and muscles. They kept running through the street until they found a hotel and quietly darted inside. After taking a moment to catch their breaths, Izuku pulled out his phone to check how long the horrid weather was going to last. "Looks like it won't stop until morning." Izuku sighed as he put his phone away. "We might as well book ourselves in." Getting a nod of confirmation from his lover, they made their way to the receptionist. "Hi, how may I be of service tonight?" the receptionist said kindly. "Me and my boyfriend would like to book any available room for tonight, just to wait out the weather." "Of course, miss, let me check if there are any rooms available." After a minute of typing on the computer, the receptionist turned back to the couple. "There is a room available on floor 8. It's a single bed, but I don't think that might be a problem." With blushes on their faces, Izuku and Kyuka were given their room key after paying and headed to the room that they would be sleeping in that night. The room itself was quite nice, as the hotel was one for people on vacation, so it had a living room, kitchen, and a balcony overlooking some of Mistreated. As Kyuka went off to have a nice warm shower, Izuku decided it was the best time to give Kyuka's parents a call and explain the situation. He took out his phone and after a moment of ringing, the call connected to a very worried Kyotoku. "Izuku! Kyuka! Are you two okay? The weather picked up NAKG. Stop screaming, honey, otherwise you're going to upset your granddaughter." A slightly annoyed Mika came through the phone. "Sorry, dear." "Now, Izuku." Mika's voice came through clear. Izuku guessed that she had now taken the phone. "Where are you two right now?" "Me and Kyuka are currently held up at a hotel and are planning to wait out the storm until morning," Izuku explained. "I hope it's not too much trouble for Arie to stay the night." "Of course not. We'd be more than happy to keep her for the night. But I must ask, where is Kyuka?" "She's just taking a shower right now. Do you mind putting Arie on for me?" "Of course, Izuku." There was the sound of shuffling for a few moments until he heard his daughter. "Papa!" "Hey, Snowball!" Izuku chuckled. "Listen, me and Kyuka aren't going to make it back until morning due to the weather, so you're going to be spending the night with your grandma and granddad, okay?" "Okay, Papa. Where's Mama?" Before Izuku could even answer, his phone was taken from him. "I'm here." Izuku wiped around and nearly died from all the blood that left his nose. Kyuka was standing behind him with her damp hair that looked silky to the touch, and in nothing but a towel clung around her that covered her body, highlighting her curves wonderfully. Kyuka looked at him with a slight smug smirk at being able to get that reaction out of her boyfriend before talking to Arie. "I have some shirts you can wear for bed, so don't worry. Sorry we won't be able to give you good night kisses." Kyuka was silently chuckling for a moment as she listened to Arie reassure her that it was okay and that she can get them tomorrow. "All right, sweetie, I'm going to hand you over to your father to say goodnight. I love you." She continued to hold that smirk as she handed the phone back to him and walked towards the bedroom with an extra sway in her hips. "Papa?" He was knocked out of his stupor by the call of his daughter. Sorry, Arie," he stammered. "I'll see you in the morning. Good night, sweetheart, I love you." "Love you too, Papa. Good night." Arie cheered before the phone was moved again. "Now, Izuku." Mika's voice came through again. "I know my husband already said this, but please don't make us grandparents anytime soon, okay?" Izuku stuttered as Mika cackled through the phone before it went silent. Izuku took the opportunity now to finally have his shower and got ready for bed. But after drying himself off and making his way out, sitting there close to dry and preparing the couch to sleep on, he noticed Kyuka leaning against the bedroom door with her towel still wrapped around her frame. "What do you think you're doing, Zuku?" "I'm making my bed for tonight." "You're not sleeping with me?" Kyuka questioned with a fake pout and a teasing glint in her eye. The bed is going to be awfully cold with just me there. Ah, if you want me tea there. Izuku stuttered, his face so hot it would blind anyone wearing night vision. His blushing got worse when she beckoned him with her finger. As she moved deeper into the bedroom, Izuku gulped and nervously walked into the room. Lemon skipped. Izuku was the first to wake up, and when he opened his eyes they were assaulted by the stinging sensation from the morning sun. After blinking a few times, his gaze landed on his beautiful girlfriend as her head rested on his chest. The light framed her face like an elegant angel, a content smile on her face from last night's events. He smiled down at her and drew his hand to brush away some loose hair from her. The action caused Kyuka to scrunch her face a bit and shift her body to be closer. 5 more minutes. Come on, Kyuka, we need to get up so we can see Arie, Izuku whispered to her as he wrapped his arms around her in a warm hug. And besides, I want to see your beautiful onyx eyes again. She hummed and nuzzled closer into his warmth. Stop using my daughter as a weapon and begin a flirt, damn it, Kyuka complained as her eyes fluttered open and stared into his eyes with a light, warm smile. Izuku squeezed her lightly. I'll make us some breakfast while you wake up more, he said before chuckling as he saw some drool escape from the corner of her mouth at the thought of his cooking. It had been a few days since the wonderful date they went on, and in Izuku's opinion it couldn't have gone any better. After dropping Kyuka off at her parents', Izuku and Arie went home, and she immediately started asking about how it went. Of course, Izuku left out the part about the little activity in the hotel but told her about everything else. She even started laughing when he told her about how Kyuka tricked him into singing. But he did curse himself when he said that nothing could ruin his good mood because of what was in front of him right now. Let me speak with the manager. Izuku sighed as he had to deal with the one thing he hated about this job, the entitled customer. What made this situation worse was that he recognized this woman as the mother of one of his bullies. The one with stretchy fingers, if he remembered correctly. Ma'am, I'm not just the manager, I'm the owner and we can't use discounts from other stores. The items aren't even that expensive, Izuku said with his best customer service smile and tone, all while thinking in his head, get the buck out of my cafe now before I do something I may regret. You! The owner! Don't be ridiculous! The woman yelled. You're just a brat with delusions of grandeur. Now get me the bucking manager now. Feeling a headache already coming on, Izuku calmly replied. Liz, I'm going to ask that you leave, you're disturbing the other patrons. Don't you tell me what to do, brat! She yelled as she brought her hand up and backhanded the green-haired boy across the face. Izuku went tumbling to the floor as Arie ran to her father's side to make sure he was all right. He looked to his daughter and saw tears start to form. This naturally brought blinding rage to the teen father, but before he could do anything he heard a thump on the counter and the woman screaming. Izuku picked himself up and saw both Nomuri, in costume, and Haruki, out of costume, standing behind the unwelcome customer who slapped him. She was bent over the counter being held there by Midnight. MS, you are under arrest for unprovoked assault. You have the right to remain silent as police are on their way. Do you not know who I am? The banshee screeched. Quite frankly, I don't give a damn, Midoriya. When the police arrive, have the security footage ready, Nomuri said. Minutes later, the police took the poor excuse of a person away after reviewing the footage and getting witness testimonies. Izuku took this time to go on break as both Nomuri and Haruki joined him upstairs with Arie fussing over her father's fall and the visible slap mark on his face. Arie, I'm fine, calm down, Snowball, he reassured her as she handed him one of her favorite stuffed animals while he laid on the couch. But Papa, Arie tried to argue but was cut off by him pulling her into a hug, letting her head rest on his chest. I'm fine, Arie, there's no reason to worry. I've already put in an assault chance against her and barred her from this place. It didn't satisfy her, but she calmed down hearing the steady beating of his heart. He soon turned to the two pro-heroes sitting opposite them. Thanks for coming, you two. Ow, it was nothing, Izuku, Haruki waved off. Besides, once Nomuri went on break, we were on our way to talk to you about something. Keep in mind you don't have to go through with it if you don't want to or don't feel comfortable, okay? Nomuri said as Izuku sat up, moving Arie onto his lap while still holding her in a cuddle. Me and Haruki were talking about this as it would be a big change for all of us, but we want your opinion. And what Haruki said next shocked Izuku. "We want to adopt you, Izuku." Izuku sat there in utter surprise that the two people who are currently sitting in front of him right now were asking if they could adopt him and be part of their family. It was almost too much for him to possess. When he lost his mom and his poor excuse of a dad long since abandoned them, he was alone in the world. Then he met Arie and brought the smile back that he long since lost. Then Kyuka and her family came into his life and he expressed love and true friendship. Now, despite having a family of his own, he always craved for that love only a mother could give. But he had long since given up on that hope, as no one wanted to adopt a teen when they could have a small kid to grow up with. So when he was asked if he wanted to become the two pro heroes' son, he didn't know what to say but didn't know what to do. He shifted Arie off his lap as he stood up and walked to them and knelt down in front of them. Before either Nemuri or Haruki could say anything, he surprised them by bringing them into a tight hug while quietly crying. Sensing this, both women brought him into a hug while his daughter ran over to join in the group hug. After a minute of this, Izuku pulled back and looked at them. With tears in his eyes, he nodded at them. "Thank you, Mom Mom Hero." The emotional moment was lifted by Arie excitedly yelling, "I have new grandmas!" This brought a chuckle to the now expanded Kayama family. Chapter 7. "So, Izuku Kayama now, huh?" "Well, Izuku Midoriya Kayama, so I can keep some part of Mom with me," Izuku said as he, Kyuka and Arie were walking hand in hand. "Well, I want to congratulate you, but I also want to pity you." Seeing Izuku's raised eyebrows, she elaborated. "You're now stuck in an endless cycle of go ask your mother. Izuku thought about it for a moment before the realization dawned on him, and he grew pale. His sudden dread caused both Arie and Kyuka to laugh at him and his newfound misery. Today was the day of the UA entrance exam, and Kyuka, Arie and Izuku were on their way there. Izuku had just finished telling Kyuka about what had happened after the adoption process had finally finished. He had asked Nemuri and Haruki that he could keep the Midoriya part as a middle name, and they were more than happy to agree. Of course, Arie also wanted the same treatment in honor of her first grandma, now going by Arie Midoriya Kayama. Izuku was a little nervous about the whole exam. Not that he wouldn't pass. Do not mistake him, he had some confidence in his abilities. No, the reason was because he heard nothing from the ash blonde that tormented him throughout his life. Granted, he never wanted to hear from him to begin with, but not so much as a whisper was kind of unsettling. But he counted his blessings that Arie didn't have to deal with him anymore. The gate, and the large H-shaped building that was UA University, was finally in sight. The party of three stopped just outside of the gates and marveled at the size of the building. Despite both Izuku and Arie having already seen it, they still felt tingly about being in front of the structure. "This is it," Kyuka said. "Our first step on becoming heroes." "Yeah!" both Izuku and Arie exclaimed in excitement, while pumping their fists in the air. They stayed there looking at the building for a few more moments before crossing the line onto UA to begin their exam. They felt like there was nothing that could stop them. Until Izuku tripped. "Buck me for all I'm worth, really," Izuku thought, but was stopped by Kyuka, who quickly grabbed onto him. "Thanks, Kyuka." "No problem, Izu. Now let's head inside before you try to give the ground a hug again." Kyuka chuckled as she walked ahead of them, completely aware of the playful glare he was sending her. "Come on, Papa," Arie said as she pulled her father towards the door and after the retreating form of her mother. "We're gonna be late." The writing exam was relatively easy enough, though Izuku did get some confused looks from the other examinees when he walked in with Arie. Arie just sat happily next to the examiner and filled in a coloring book. The duo eventually met up back with Kyuka for lunch, and she looked like she wanted to die as her head hit the table. "This is illegal torture and I do not appreciate it," she groaned. Izuku chuckled nervously as he too thought that the test was difficult as he patted his girlfriend on the back as they enjoyed their lunch, while Kyuka and Arie, whereas Izuku was just slowly eating and looking around the dining hall. They noticed this, and so Arie asked, "Papa, what's wrong?" Izuku was hesitant to answer but reluctantly did. "It's just, I know that I'm better off that he's not here, but Bakugo had always yelled about how I'm going to destroy the UA exam, so to not see him here is just unnerving. I feel like I've got a punch to the back of my head any second now." The two girls frowned at his admission, and while yes, Bakugo didn't deserve to be in these halls, they couldn't deny that while having bad memories of him, Not having him there made them a bit antsy. But like always in his life, Arie was there to help him through his dilemmas as she turned around and hugged him. "It's okay, Papa. We don't have to worry about that angry Pomeranian again." The two teenagers blinked for a moment as they looked at Arie before Izuku asked, "Arie, where did you associate Bakugo with a Pomeranian?" "Mama said it one day when she was helping some of your burns." The green-haired father looked to his punk girlfriend as she blushed and looked away, thinking that he would scold her, but was thrown off when she heard him trying to keep his laughter in. She turned around just in time to see him finally break into fits of laughter. "Leave it to you to make a compensation like that and have Arie unintentionally learn from it." After calming down, he continued, "Though I think it might be an insult to Pomeranians everywhere." It was now Kyuka's turn to laugh at Izuku's comment, not expecting him to jab at his former tormentor. Arie just sat there still hugging Izuku as she watched her parents laughing with each other. She liked it better when they were happy and not sad about things that didn't matter anymore. The UA auditorium was massive as Kyuka sat with her boyfriend and daughter in the middle row as all the other examinees started to trickle into the room. All the seats were pointed towards a stage in the middle of the room with bright stage lights shining directly onto it. When the last of the exam participants were seated, the lights went out, and a familiar blonde pro hero came onto the stage. "Can I get a YA?" Sadly for him, everyone present was quiet, except for the muffled giggles of a white-haired unicorn when Present Mike tugged on his collar. "Wow, tough crowd. It's the voice hero, Present Mike. We listen to him every week on the radio. This is incredible. The teachers at UA really are pro heroes," Izuku quietly gushed. "Carefully, Izu, you might go into a mutter storm." Kyuka smirked when she saw her boyfriend blush. "Now pay attention, listeners." Present Mike threw out another hand, the screen behind him showing off a diagram of 7 different boxes, each labeled with a different letter. "You examinees will be conducting a 10-minute mock urban battle at our replica city districts. After the presentation, you'll all head out to your specified battle centers that are labeled on your cards. We decided to mix you all up for some unpredictability, so your groups will be auto-generated, with the classmates from your school being split up. Okay?" Another pointed silence fell. "Come on." As they checked their cards, Izuku leaned over to have a look at Kyuka's cards, his brow furrowing and his frown deepening. "In other words," he mumbled, "they're splitting everyone up so you won't get the chance to work with your friends, huh?" "Yeah, it seems so," Kyuka acknowledged, looking at both their cards to see that they have different letters before smirking. "Shame, I was looking forward to kicking your butt." Izuku just shook his head with an amused smile. Present Mike continued on with the presentation, showing a screen of a pixelated version of him fighting off robots of different sizes, with points being added to the screen as each robot went down. "We'll be sprinkling in a large number of villains for you listeners to fight in each battle center. And they'll appear in 3 different varieties, with point values scaled according to difficulty. Using each of your individual quirks, dispatch and or immobilize as many villains as you can. Your goal, dear listeners, is to earn as many points as you can in the limited time we're giving you. And don't think about attacking any other competitors or any of that nasty anti-hero stuff, because that's against the rules. Capice?" A few rows in front of them, a hand suddenly shot up as one of the students stood. "Excuse me. May I ask a question?" "Go ahead." Present Mike pointed directly at him, and a spotlight from the roof shone down on the boy who had stood up, a tall, broad boy with glasses and short dark blue hair, who held the information sheet on the villains that would be used in the exam. "On this printout," he pointed at the card, "there are clearly 4 types of villains listed. And the presentation has only described 3 types of villain bots. If that is a misprint, such an error would be the height of embarrassment for a top-tier National Academy of UA's caliber. The reason we are seated here today is because we seek guidance on the path to becoming model heroes. We cannot afford to be given inaccurate information." "Boy, that guy is loud." Kyuka grimaced slightly, while Arie shrunk in her father's lap at the loudness of the blue-haired teen. And as a side note, the boy suddenly wheeled right around and pointed directly at Izuku. "You there! With the curly green hair!" Izuku squeaked a bit as he suddenly became the center of attention, everyone else looking around at him when he was called out. You've been muttering this whole time. The glasses guy glared at him. You are a distraction. And why do you have a kid here? If you think UA is some pleasure daycare or something, then you should leave this place at once for the sake of the other examinees that wish to seriously take this exam. Now Izuku could begin called out for his muttering, and if it was a distraction he would apologize for it. But as he felt his daughter shaking in his hold and feeling some tears on his shirt, well, there was Mama Bear, and Papa Bear was not having it. And what's it to you? Izuku growled, not at all surprising Kyuka as she knew how protective he is of Arie and how Arie was protective of him. If my muttering was a distraction, then President Mike or anyone near me would have said something, not you. As for the girl in my lap, I couldn't find anyone to look after her while I take the exam. The teachers and principal are already aware of her being here. Now I suggest you shut up and focus on yourself instead of making a little girl cry. The auditorium was silent except for the faint sounds of light crying and sniffing from Arie. Izuku did his best to calm her down as best he could by patting and stroking her hair while whispering in her ear. He's mean, they heard the girl say. Although she said it quickly, it may have been shouted. If Izuku cared to look up, he would have seen the blue-hair boy in a state of shock and self-disgust that a child called him, a future hero hopeful, mean. Yes, he is Arie. Now everyone didn't know why, but seeing the girl cry made them turn to the teen who shouted at Izuku and glare at him until he sat down without another word. But for some reason they all felt like picking up pitchforks and torches for a crusade. Okay, thanks for the segue, much appreciated. Examinee number 7111. President Mike waved his hands to get the room's attention again, and hoping to de-escalate the situation, flashing the glasses guy a thumbs up. The fourth type of villain you'll encounter is worth 0 points. Let's call them area traps. This guy is merely there to serve as an obstacle, so to speak. Have any of you ever played Super Mario Bros. Before? I guess it is rather retro. But anyway, do you remember those things that'd go thwomp on you? There's a thing like that in each arena. Their gimmick is that they rampage when crowded. There's exactly one in every battle center, an obstacle that'll go cross A and arrow spaces. It's not impossible to defeat, but there's no reason to defeat it either. I'd recommend that you listeners try to avoid it. Thank you, sir, he mumbled, still receiving glares from everyone. Well, that's about enough from me. President Mike dramatically waved his hands in the air. I'll leave all you listeners with a presentation on the school precepts of this academy of mine. As a certain general by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte once said, a true hero never stops overcoming the misfortunes in life. A nice little soundbite. Now let's move on to the main event. Go beyond. He threw his hands into the air as he screamed out, Plus Ultra! And behind him, the screen above the stage flashed the 2 words in a large, bold font. Now you say something. Now then, everyone, good luck. And may you all suffer gladly in the trials to come. When the room filtered out Izuku, Kyuka and Arie walked to the stage where Mike was still standing. He played his daughter down and gave her a kiss on her horn. Be good for the other heroes, okay? Okay, Papa. She smiled brightly. Kyuka chuckled at her daughter and kissed her on the cheek. We'll be back soon. Arie ran up to them and gave them the biggest hug her tiny arms could muster. Do awesome out there, Mama! Papa! Kick their metal butts! With one final goodbye, they walked off to their respective buses after giving each other a good luck kiss. Chapter 8. Izuku stood in front of the mock city gates and was currently having a mental panic attack. Oh God, my quirk is not combative. It doesn't work on robots. And even then I can only sweat the actual toxin. I need something to actually inject it into people. This was currently Izuku's state of mind as he paced back and forth while going over his options in his head. He remembered something that his new mother Haruki took the time to teach him. When panicking, do some breathing exercises and eat some bubblegum, as it will take your mind off of what's happening. Doing as he was instructed, he took a deep breath in and out a few times before sticking a piece of mint bubblegum into his mouth. As he chewed, he felt himself calm down more and more before realizing that there was another examinee who was having similar troubles. She had chestnut brown hair in the shape of a bob cut and 2 permanent blush marks. She looked like she was going to be sick from nervousness, so Izuku decided to try and help. He was about to make his way when he felt a large hand and firm hand on his shoulder. He turned around and saw the same blue-haired boy who made his daughter cry. That girl is trying to concentrate. Are you trying to distract her and running her chances at you? I'm gonna punch you in the gut for making Arie cry in a minute, Izuku thought to himself as he wondered if the taller boy had forgotten what happened in the auditorium a couple minutes ago. Izuku was going to respond to him, but some guy beat him too. Hey man, back off. You already made that kid that was with him cry, and now you're trying to embarrass him or intimidate him? Are you sure you're supposed to be applying for the hero course? I was simply dash. He cut himself off when he noticed everyone giving him a cold look. To Izuku they almost looked like demons. Another examinee scoffed as she looked at the taller boy with an unamused face before saying, Just leave him alone. If anyone's distracting anyone here, it's you. Yeah. Stop trying to embarrass the guy, another called out. And so the teen walked away after finally getting the message that he was not wanted. Izuku looked at the examinee with a relieved smile. Thank you for the save there. No problem, my guy, he said before walking away to prepare for the exam. Izuku was about to walk to the girl before the gates opened. Nobody moved as they waited for someone to announce that they could start. They stood there for a moment before President Mick's voice came booming through the speakers. What are you waiting for? There's no countdown in real life. Go! 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 And with that, Izuku jumped from the frying pan and into the fryer as he bolted into the mock city with the other examinees. He split off from a few of them and found a one-pointer. Hero located! Exterminate! He felt a chill run down his spine at hearing the robot's words, but regarded himself. He dogged and attacked the mechanism through as he tried looking for a way to stop it. Only when he got behind the machine did he see a lever on the top and off at the bottom. That must be it. Izuku rushed forward and yanked the lever down with all his might, causing the robot to halt in what it was doing and shut down. Izuku threw his hands up in victory and yells from the top of his voice. I got a point! Now all that was left was to find more. In a dark observation room somewhere sat the faculty of UA, all watching this year's contestants through monitors. They saw a boy who shot a laser out from a belt that he wore around his stomach, a girl who can enlarge her hands crush a three-pointer's head, two boys who could harden their skin, and a grill who ensnared 5 robots with her vine-like hair. This year's batch is quite interesting, Nisa said. Arie sat to his left with her own monitor that followed Izuku and Kyuka. I have to agree. Especially the 2 hardening boys over there, a cowboy-looking man said, pointing to 2 separate screens. Though they seem a little bit too gung-ho with charging into the fray. While Yasna, Yuri, and Haruki were looking at the other hero hopefuls, they still kept an eye on their son, and was pleased with his progress, as he led a 3-pointer to friendly fire upon a group of 1-pointers. They also kept an eye on Kyuka and saw her send vibrations through her jacks to shatter a 2-pointer that was bearing down on a girl with pink skin and hair. Nisa looked to his side and watched Arie vibrate at seeing how cool her parents were. He smiled lightly as she tried to not shout in excitement whenever they got a point. Say, young Arie, when you look at this exam, what do you see? Arie looked at the potential rat god with confusion. People being heroes? He shook his head and chuckled. No, Arie. What I mean is, look at the exam closely and see if you can pick anything out. The young girl looked at all the monitors to try and figure out what he was trying to make her see. The other adult watched as she slowly placed the puzzle together. People with fighting quirks are doing better than those like Mama and Papa? Correctly answered young Arie. Nisa cackled. I'll let you in on a little secret. Even though we tried to be biased, we designed this test to favor those with combat quirk. That doesn't seem fair. Arie pouted. She didn't like hearing this, as it was now revealed that the test was stacked against her mother and father. It took the combination of everyone glaring and 4 ectoplasm clones to keep Aizawa from saying anything. Nisa paid them no mind as he refocused on the monitors. Yes, but look at the robots on the field. What do you notice about them? She looked at the screens again and cupped her chin between her thumb and pointer finger and started muttering much like her father. Her eyes darted from one screen to the other until she saw something her father and mother were doing. She watched as Izuku turned off a robot that was approaching him and flipped a switch on its back to turn it off. Then she saw Kyuka approach the scrapped remains of the 3-pointer and took its rocket launcher. The robots have a switch to turn them off, and you can use their weapons. Arie exclaimed as she finally figured it out. Nizu clapped as she got it right, but something was bothering her. Why can you do that, Mr. Nizu? You see, we understand that those that cannot directly destroy things are at a disadvantage, but like real-life heroes have to think outside the box, he explained. So we made it so you could simply turn them off, turn them against each other, or use their weapon. Though for safety reasons I have Power Loader put in a safety percussion so that it will only fire at the robots, and not people. But that's not the only way to get points, Nizu continued, enjoying the look of intrigue that was on her adorable face. There's a secret point system for those that help people in the exam, either by helping with a robot, rescuing them, or healing. It all goes. Just don't tell your mother and father, as we tried to keep it a secret. Arie nodded quickly and made a zipping motion across her face. The adults in the room chuckled at her antics, though Aizawa did have to get his jab in. I still say that this test is illogical, he grumbled. You're just salty that you failed to notice it when you did your exam and had to get into the hero course through the sports festival. Kazashi teased, and for his troubles he got choked by Aizawa's scarf. No one told her that blowing up some stupid robots would be a good stress reliever. Kyuko was having a ball with the weapon that she stole from the three-pointer. Good thing we are able to use their weapons, Kyuko thought to herself with a grimace. My jacks felt like they were about to start bleeding. She ran through the street, destroying as many as she could before she realized that there was only one missile left. She looked around before spotting someone being cornered by a two-pointer. Kyuko aimed her last rocket and fired on the unsuspecting robot. She discarded her weapon and walked to the examinee to offer her hand. The examinee sneered at her and smacked her hand away before getting up and walking away. She rubbed her hand and looked at the retreating form of the boy. He had shaggy lavender hair and heavy bags under his eyes. What made it more curious was that he had absolutely no muscle mass to speak of. Hick, she said to herself as she walked away. He was as skinny as a twig. Did he come here thinking his quirk would be enough to pass? Her musing over the rude contestant was cut short when she heard and felt a rumbling beneath her feet. Buildings started to shake and she heard people yelling. Kyuko ran to the source of the tremors only to see a monstrosity looming over everyone. Its size reached high above the buildings, and its shape she recognized as that of the zero-pointer. What the dash? Hell is this shit? Izuku yelled as he gazed up at the zero-pointer in his field, unknowingly saying the same thing as his punk girlfriend. All around him people were running away while screaming for their lives. He even heard one with balls for hair scream like a little girl, while yelling for his mother. Upon reflection of this day, Izuku would chuck because Arie had a more sensible scream and she was a little girl at that time. Izuku stumbled as he was backing up and fell on his ass, but his mind was too busy trying to make sense of his fight or flight instincts to do anything. But once it did, he scribbled to stand and run for his life. That was until he heard something behind him. Ack! Everything stopped for Izuku as he gazed behind him, and there in the rubble near the approaching tread of the zero-pointer was the brown-haired girl from the start of the exam. But to Izuku he didn't see her, and instead saw Kyuko. He didn't know what happened, but one minute he was standing there, and the next he was running to the downed girl. He didn't have a destructive quirk, he didn't have a way to stop the zero-pointer, he couldn't do anything to help in this situation, so why the hell am I running? He made it to the brunette, and lifted the slab that trapped her leg. Are you alright, MS? Why yeah, I think my ankle is twisted though, she said. Izuku had no time to think as the colossal robot was starting to get closer. He picked her up in a bridal carry and shot off to where everyone else was. Sadly, with Izuku being exhausted from the exam and now having to carry another person, he couldn't outrun the robot, but when he was a three-pointer missile launcher he quietly got an idea. MS, there's a three-pointer rocket launcher coming to our left. Reach down and grab it. Why? Trust me. And she did. She quickly reached down as he kept running and grabbed it. Now point it at the zero-pointer and fire everything it's got. Now getting it, the brunette fired everything the launcher had at the robot's single eye, and while it did give it pause, it didn't do much in the long term. Just when they thought that this was it, the bell rang and President Mick's voice rang out. And time's up! And just like that, the colossal machine shut down, allowing Izuku to catch his breath. He looked around and saw an elderly woman wearing a doctor's coat that he recognized as the hero recovery girl walking up to them. He knelt down to allow the small woman to get a better look at the brown-haired girl in his arms. "Are you all right, my dear? Jay just twisted my ankle." "Well, let's get you patched up," Recovery Girl said as her lips extended and kissed her on her head. After a moment, Izuku helped the brunette up and onto her feet. "I recommend not doing any running for a few days just to be safe." She turned to face Izuku. "What about you, dear?" "Just exhausted, nothing major," he said. "Well, you can return to the bus to go home." And with that, Izuku walked to the bus. After a bit of driving, he made it to Yue again, where Nizu, Present Mike, Arie and Kyuka were waiting for them. "Papa!" Arie yelled as she slammed into him while she hugged his leg. "You and Mama were so awesome!" "Why, thank you, Snowball." He lifted Arie into his arms and turned his attention to the two Yue staff members as Kyuka walked to his side. "Thanks for doing this, Nizu, you didn't have to." "Oh, it was a pleasure looking after her." The rat waved off. "Now run along home before it gets too dark." "We will, and again thank you," Kyuka said, and with nothing more said the young family walked off, but not before Arie said one more thing. "Bye, Uncle Nizu." Arie waved, catching everyone by surprise. Her parents stumbled a bit, Present Mike choked, and Nizu himself stilled. After a minute and Izuku, Kyuka and Arie were fully gone, Nizu started to chuckle, not an evil or insane one that Mike was used to, but a warm one, and that terrified the voice hero. "You know what? I get it now," Nizu said softly. "WW what, sir?" Mike stuttered. "That old saying." Nizu smiled as he began to walk back into his university. "If anything happens to her, I'll kill everyone on this planet, and then myself." All Hizashi could do was pray for whoever decides to hurt that young girl that her parents got to them before Nizu did. That night, Izuku and Kyuka laid in bed asleep. Kyuka and Arie went to a local fast food restaurant before heading back to his cafe. It was getting late, and by the time Kyuka would get home it would be dark out, so he offered her to sleep there. After their date, Kyuka occasionally slept over with him, claiming that she just wanted to get away from her annoying old man, but the real case was that she now struggled to sleep without his warmth near her, so she often had spare clothes at his place. They watched a movie with Arie before tucking her into bed and headed to bed themselves. It was only hours later that Izuku felt a tug at his arm to wake him up. He groggily opened his eyes to be met by the sight of his daughter. She was standing there with the door opened, and her stuffed white and green bunny clinging to her chest. He was about to say something before he looked at her properly. She was shaking, and her eyes held fear with tears pricking them. His parental instincts kicked in as he sat up and picked her up to bring her onto the bed for a hug. He hugged her as tight as he could while rubbing her back to calm her down. His shirt felt wet as she cried into it, but he could care less at this moment. After calming her down, he wiped the remaining tears from her eyes. "What's wrong, Snowball?" "I had a nightmare," she stuttered. "Oh, sweetie, that can't possibly happen." Arie looked at him confused as he smiled at her. "Because I am the master of nightmares. And I did not order them to hurt you." Arie burst into fits of giggles and laughter from not only what her father had said but also because he was tickling her. The sound of the young girl woke Kyuka up, and she couldn't help but join in by extending her jacks and getting Arie by the neck. After calming down, Kyuka asked, "So now that I'm awake, what's all the fuss about?" "Arie had a nightmare," Izuku responded. "Oh, my poor baby, come here," she said as she picked up her daughter and brought her closer to her. "You want to talk about it?" "I was about a bunch of bad men taking me away from you and Papa. They said that I'd never see you again," the white-haired child told, now being hugged by both her parents. "Can I sleep here with you two tonight?" "Of course you can, Arie," Izuku said as they lied down with her in between both Izuku and Kyuka as they hugged her and each other. "Good night, Arie, night, Kyuka," he said, kissing the top of their heads. "Good night, Papa, Mama." "Good night, Arie, good night, Izuku." Chapter 9. It has been 3 weeks since the entrance exam, and Izuku was getting nervous about whether or not he and Kyuka had passed. He was also worried about how the state of the world has not changed since Arie dubbed Nizu her uncle, but that worry could come later. His moms hasn't said anything about the exam other that they can't tell him. Arie tried her best to calm him down, but had to keep biting her tongue to not give anything away. Kyuka had the most success in calming him down, but she did it in a rather unorthodox way. She walked up to him and smiled warmly before smacking him upside the head. Listen, Izuku. Kyuka spoke with authority in her voice. There's no use in panicking on what ifs. Focus on the now before you drive yourself into a hole. That did help a little, but not much. Arie did copy her mother by slapping him across the face, thinking that it would help him. That was also the day that all three realized that the little girl had one hell of an arm on her. It was also the day that Namuri decided to teach her some basic self-defense. Eventually Izuku's letter arrived and he, Kyuka, Arie and his moms were in his living room waiting for him to open his letter. Taking a deep breath, he opened his letter and a small disc-like object fell out. The young parents and their daughter were confused for a moment before the device came to life and showed. I am here! On a projection! Almight! Indeed, Almight himself was currently projected for all to see. His appearance was a shock to the young family watching, while his moms just tried not to laugh at his reaction. I know what you're thinking, Almight said. This is from UA, why am I here? But here's the thing. You're looking at the newest UA faculty member. So you work for UA? Izuku muttered, still wide-eyed. Now then, let's get down to business, Almight declared. Young Midoriya, you have passed the written exam with flying colors and ranked first among all applicants. And more than that, you have acquired 23 points by destroying villains. Sadly, that is not enough to enter. Izuku and Kyuka were downtrodden at the news as they both wanted to get into the hero course together. Arie, on the other hand, remembered what her new uncle said and was waiting for it to be announced. But that's not all, Almight said, causing them to pause. Please take a look at this. He directed their attention to a smaller screen. That's... Izuku froze when he saw the girl he saved at the exam. He watched as the brunette approached President Mike. The girl got the hero's attention. What's up, little listener? President Mike asked. It's... The girl started shyly. You know that examinee that helped me? The green-haired one with the plain face? Plain face? Kyuka thought with a bit of irritation, while sneaking a glance at Izuku, who didn't even seem fazed. To be fair though, I do think I'm below average in terms of looks. I was wondering if you could give him my points? The girl said, causing Kyuka and Izuku to stare in shock. It's just, he wasted time to help me, time he could have used to get more points. So please, give him my points. She wanted to give me her points? Izuku asked in shock. As I told you when we first met, Almight spoke up again. It matters not what your power is, but your actions are what matter, and your actions inspired this girl. You see, there was another criterion for this exam. Rescue points. Rescue? Kyuka questioned. What kind of hero school would we be if we turned away those who were willing to risk themselves for others? That is why we had judges observing you and giving out points based on heroic actions. The screen changed to show all of the times that Izuku took the time to help out other examinees. You have spent the entire exam looking out for your fellow examinees and rushed straight into danger to save this girl. For this, you have been awarded 44 rescue points, bringing your overall score up to 67, scoring 5th place. Izuku and Kyuka's eyes went wide as All Might extended his hand towards the camera. Come, young Midoriya, young Arie, this is your hero academia, he said sincerely. Silence rang throughout the room as Izuku tried to process the fact that he just got accepted into UA. He was knocked out of his stupor by Arie, hugging the life out of him while cheering. Everyone else quickly followed while Kyuka hugged him too while giving him a kiss on the cheek. Haruki placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, while Namuri ruffled his bushy hair. Told you could do it, Izuku, Kyuka said, resting her head on his shoulder before blinking. What class are you in? Classes are usually underneath the device, Haruki told them. Arie was already on it as she grabbed the device and looked underneath. It says 1A, you're in class 1A, Papa. He smiled at his daughter and held her close. This was it. This was his first step into becoming a hero, but sadly the moment was ruined when both father and daughter went wide-eyed when they realized something. They're gonna have to start packing. It was a grueling process, but both Izuku and Arie managed to pack everything they needed into boxes and into a moving truck provided by UA themselves. he also packed up some of Kyuka's clothes when they got her letter that told her that she passed and was in the same class as Izuku. The difference between the two was that the person telling her that she passed was Present Mike. Looking back at the cafe, Izuku had a sad smile as he would have to close down until otherwise. He was incredibly lucky that his regular customers were understanding and were supportive about the need to temporarily close. Haruki and Namuri agreed to also pay for the cafe's bills until after he graduated from UA. To see it close its doors until then, or when he had time, was saddening to him. He felt the tug of his pants and saw Arie with a similarly sad smile. "Can we still open every now and then, Papa?" Izuku ruffled his daughter's hair. "Of course we can, sweetie. Now let's follow the van to our new temporary home." With a final nod from Arie, they both got into their car and drove off to Yui, ready for him to start his new life as a hero. The drive wasn't anything spectacular, but before he even made it to the university, he felt the vibration of his phone in his pocket. "Arie, could you get my phone? I think someone texted me." "Okay, Papa." She leaned over and dug into his pocket to fish for his phone. Once out, she saw who texted him. "It's Mama." "What did she say, sweetie?" "She said that there was a letter on the dorm's door," Arie told to her father. "It said to leave your stuff there and go to class 1A. Izuku didn't understand why they had to, but whatever it was could be important, right? Why did he feel impending doom right about now? 1A, where are you?" Izuku was currently running down the halls with Arie on his shoulders as both of them were trying to find their class. He was about to turn a corner when Arie pointed out to a door. "Over there, Papa." Finally finding the door, both father and daughter gazed upon the massive door with 1A written on it. They both had similar thoughts about the giant door and who might be inside. Opening the door and stepping inside, they were met with the usual chatter of class that was getting to know each other, though the first thing that caught his attention was that Bakugo was nowhere in sight, much to his and Arie's delight. When they heard the door open, their focus was immediately on them. Well, more specifically, the little girl on his shoulders. "Oh my God! She's adorable!" Two girls squealed and rushed to get a closer look. One had pink skin and hair while the other was completely invisible. When Arie got embarrassed by the attention, she buried her face in her father's hair, earning a coo from the two girls in front of him. "She's so precious." "Is she your sister?" the pink one said. "Oh, I'm Mina Ashido." Izuku was about to respond before he heard the familiar sound of someone with a stick up their ass. "Children are not permitted on school grounds. This is a hero's school, not a daycare." Izuku glared at the Sonic ripoff. "First of all, she's allowed here due to our specific circumstances. Second, if you dare try to take her away, I'll make sure you can't distinguish reality from nightmares again." The blue-haired boy was about to respond, most likely complaining about threatening a fellow student, before Arie spoke with a pout. "I don't like him, Papa. He's mean." That got everyone's attention as everything went silent before he heard snickering coming from Kyuka. "Couldn't wait until we got into the dorms to say that, did you, sweetie?" "Mama!" she yelled with her arms in the air, and a sun-blinding smile adorned her adorable face. "What?" everyone yelled out in shock. The blue-haired boy went catatonic. A purple midget was twitching in anger, and a woman with vines for hair was silently praying. "Hand on a minute." A boy with yellow hair with a black lightning bolt spoke up in confusion. "She called you and her mama and papa, but she looks nothing like you. What gives?" "I adopted her years back," Izuku explained. It seemed to calm a lot of people down, especially the vine girl, who stopped her praying and muttering of sin after she heard that. He then went on to explain how he found her and the decision to raise her by himself. Needless to say, some of the class was brought to tears at his decision to bring a child up himself. One in particular shouted the word manly at the end. The boy who confronted him earlier apologized for his rude behavior, which Izuku forgave, but said he was on thin ice. After a while, they gave introductions on their names before the door opened and Aizawa rolled onto the class. "First day and you're already making too much noise for my tastes," he groaned as he unzipped himself from his cocoon of a yellow sleeping bag. "He looks like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly," Arie whispered to his and Kyuka's ears. They had to stop themselves from laughing at her comment, though a snort did escape them. "My name is Shota Aizawa and I'm your homeroom teacher." The class erupted in shock once more. Aizawa ignored them and dug into his sleeping bag and pulled out some PE uniforms. "Put these on and go to the training ground." And with that he left the classroom without another word. The class was speechless but moved on with his order, and Izuku still had some of the dread from earlier. This certainly won't be a boring 3 years, the young couple though as they went to the changing rooms. Chapter 10. A quirk assessment test? The gathered class said as one. They were currently standing in an open field with Aizawa, and Arie who stood beside him, standing in front of them all. A soft murmur started to echo across the confused students before Aizawa's eyes flashed a bright red, and his hair stood on end, making most of the students flinch. Once he deactivated his quirk, Aizawa looked towards Yaoyorozu. "Yaoyorozu, what was your old ball toss score in high school?" The Ravionette tilted her head for a moment, thinking about it since it had been quite a while. Momo looked at Aizawa and replied, "About 57 meters, sir." Aizawa tossed a ball to the black-haired girl as he went to stand by a drawn-out circle on the ground. "I want you to stand in this circle and throw the ball with your quirk. Do not hold anything back, and you can do anything as long as you remain in the circle." She gave a nod and moved to stand in the designated spot. She stood there for a bit before lifting her gym shirt up a bit as sparkles appeared around her stomach. The next thing anyone knew, she created a whole cannon from her stomach and watched as she loaded the ball into the cannon. After getting it primed and ready, she stood behind and pulled a string, letting loose a large explosion that made Kyuko wince from the noise. "The point of these tests is to give a baseline for your current strengths and weaknesses to work on for your years here at UA." The teacher turned to Momo, who was now back to her original spot among the students. "Yaoyorozu, your score was 970 meters. The tall girl beamed with pride at hearing her score. She got even brighter when she heard Arie mutter, "So cool," under her breath. "Now, we are going to do the 50-meter dash first. It will be done in pairs. But first..." Aizawa paused as he looked over the students who were starting to relax a little. "Since it looks like many of you aren't taking this seriously, let's up the challenge a bit." The students shivered as he gave them a smile. As he crossed his arms and stared directly at them, pushing up his scarf a little. "The person who places last in these tests will be expelled." To say that the silence was deafening was an understatement before a collective "what?" rang out, followed by a few protests. Aizawa was able to pick up on Ochako's "but that's not fair" comment and focused on her. "Surprise villain attacks, unavoidable weather disasters." His eyes squinted at her, causing Ochako to flinch. "Robots that go rogue in a controlled environment are all unfair. Life, in general, is unfair. You are all adults now, time to grow up." And with the finality in his voice, he headed towards the track for the 50-meter dash. All of the students hurriedly kept up with him with worried looks upon their faces. Still, a few of them had a look of determination, as if aiming to prove to their teacher they had the drive needed. Izuku gulped when Aizawa's speech was finished, but he knew how life wasn't fair in the slightest, otherwise he would still have his mother, and Arie would never have been abandoned by her own, though he supposed that if none of this happened then he would never have met his daughter or Kyuka at all. Still, that speech was something else entirely, as it made him shake in his boots, coupled with the fact that thanks to Namuri that he knew Aizawa wasn't bluffing. He just honestly hoped that he could survive the end of the day, and hoped that his teacher had the heart to let them stay. Izuku decided that his teacher was a sadist, at least partially, as he knew how the principal could be thanks to his new moms. While Izuku was in shape, it was still exhausting, and judging by the way Kyuka was panting, she really wanted to pass out right there and then. The tests were a nightmare for them, as most of the tests required some sort of physical quirk to get a decent score in. So for Kyuka's earphone jack quirk, it allowed her to get an edge slightly in the grip strength test by coiling them around the device with her hand to get a higher score. Izuku, on the other hand, with his quirk could do jack shit in the test. He did decent in it, but you could tell that he struggled. The only thing keeping him going was his daughter cheering him and her mother on. Most of the girls and Kirishima cooed when she did. After it was all said and done, they lined up to reserve their score. He closed his eyes, just waiting for the inevitable, and when he opened his eyes he saw his placement. 19th. He was 19th, just above someone named Mineta. Izuku sighed in relief. "No!" The short purple-haired boy named Mineta cried out with tears streaming down his face. Oh yeah. Aizawa's voice drew everyone's gaze to him. That whole expulsion thing was a logical ruse to get you to work harder. No one's getting expelled. Arie ran to both Izuku and Kyuka as they smiled softly at her while wrapping their arms around their little girl. Sounds of relief flooded their ears as everyone finally processed what was said. A cough from Aizawa silenced them, though. That's all there is for today. Get changed and get out of here. Enjoy your weekend, for you won't have such time to rest when the week begins. Silence hung in the air for a moment longer before Aizawa left in silence. He stopped for a moment to address something else. Kiyama, Jairu, the principal wishes to speak with you when you're changed. And with that he left, leaving the remaining students to slowly walk back to the changing rooms. Two of the boys, Kirishima and Kaminari, offered to look after Arie while they found out what the rat wanted. They made their way to the office, but when they reached the door they suddenly felt a cold shiver run down their spines, as if knowing they were there the door creaked open like an old horror movie that would jump scare you. Come in! Come in! The voice of Nizu called. They stepped into the office to see the principal typing away at the computer. Don't mind me, just planning on tearing down the American government. Why are you planning that, sir? Izuku gulped. To eventually make my niece the queen. Why American then? Kyuka questioned with hesitation. Because let's be honest here. Nizu sighed, no longer destabilizing a foreign nation's government. They could put a potato in the office and it would do a much better job. Izuku didn't know how to feel about his principal wanting to make his little girl the queen of a country but kept quiet. His line of thinking was what could he possibly do to stop Nizu from going on with this plan. Anyway, he clapped his paws together. I just wanted to inform you that, due to your unique circumstances, that a special room has been set for you two and Arie to live in. They stared at him in shock that he'd go this far for them. Honestly, they just suspected that he put them in separate rooms that were next to each other. Wait, why not have Aizawa tell us this? They both questioned. Now where would the fun be in that? Nizu cackled as he soon delved into insane laughter, now fully creeped out for the day the two lovers left the room. When the couple entered the dorms, they expected a few things that were proven true, like someone stocking the fridge and freezer, some watching TV/setting up some game consoles. Uraraka passed out on the floor. Come on! Before the rock trapped the heroes in the cave! Kaminari yelled while holding Thunderbird 1. Kirishima was also holding a Crimson Riot action figure. FAB Thunderbird 1! Arie said as she whooshed her Thunderbird 2 around. Izuku and Kyuka were presently surprised to see the two boys that volunteered to watch their daughter playing with her. They actually thought that they'd be sitting on the couch watching TV or something. Arie noticed them and quietly ran to them and jumped into their waiting arms. Mama! Papa! How was Uncle Nizu? He's doing fine. Izuku chuckled before facing the two boys. Thank you for watching her. Nah, no problem, bro, Kirishima said. Anything to help. Kyuka looked down to their unicorn child. Why don't you come help us set up our rooms now and together we make something for the class? Is that okay with you? Like at the cafe? She gasped excitedly. Izuku nodded and laughed in amusement as her face lit up the room. But what brought that laughter to an end was when she ran to Kirishima and gave him a hug. Thank you, Uncle Kiri, she said before turning to Kaminari and hugging him. Thank you, Uncle Kami. Arie bolted up the stairs, leaving a stunned Izuku, Kyuka, Kirishima and Kaminari. The couple thought that their daughter would probably consider some in their class as family at some point, considering that they would be spending 3 years together. But for it to happen so quickly, all Izuku could do was pat the two boys' shoulders and mutter, "Welcome to the family," before walking off to join Arie. Mina came along and waved her hand in front of her friend's face. Kiri? You okay? He was silent for a moment before bursting into manly tears. I'm Uncle Kiri! Kaminari vowed in his head that no matter how stupid he gets, he would protect that precious snowball. Chapter 11. Yui was everything like Izuku expected, and yet at the same time wasn't. They were taught by pro heroes every day, and while that was amazing, it quickly lost its charm somewhat. He did find it amusing that they set up a little desk next to his so Arie could work next to either him or Kyuka. speaking of the school, made some class work for Arie appropriate for her age to do in class and would be graded like any other student. This also brought great concern to both the couple and the staff that it was Nizu who made the work. Nemuri taught his modern hero art history, and for a moment he thought it would be fun being taught by his mom, but quickly realized the folly in this. When he entered the room with his class, she was hidden within the podium in front of the class, so when he walked past she sprang and engulfed him in a tight hug. The class was shocked by this, with Ida making a remark about it being inappropriate. Kyuka was laughing her ass off, with Arie giggling to herself. Him and his moms agreed that they wouldn't tell any of his class about their relations, as they could interpret his grades as favoritism, though what he didn't know was that Nemuri and Haruki agreed in secret that they would hug their son in class to embrace him. Also, speaking of Haruki, he learned something about one of his classmates. He was making breakfast for everyone when Ochako Uraraka came down the stairs in 13 pajamas. They were also the same ones Arie was wearing at that moment. So naturally the two gushed about the pro to each other and listing off their favorite rescues. The conversation ended with her honoring the brunette as Auntie Oka, causing the girl to faint from the adorableness. Mina also wasn't spared, as she was often there with Kirishima playing with her. The now dubbed Auntie Mina also hit the deck as her heart combusted for a moment. An invisible girl named Toru mumbled that they were dropping like flies, though no one really complained. It was currently the last lesson of the day and they were all seated in their classroom ready. They watched the door in anticipation when a booming, recognizable voice called out, "I am." The door burst open, revealing All Might in an older costume, entering the room like a normal person. "It's All Might!" Kirishima yelled, pointing at the hero. "Is that his Silver Age outfit, Ribbit?" Tsu asked, pointing out the cape ruffling in the wind behind him. "It is," Izuku confirmed. He retired the cape when he switched to his current outfit. He only wears the caped outfits for special occasions now. Arie and Kyuka giggled at Izuku needing out, with the latter giving him a teasing grin, when he saw it, causing him to blush and hide his face. His daughter at least cared enough to give him a pity hug. "Good eyes, class. That will be a good talent to hone, distinguishing what outfits your fellow heroes and the villains you fight are wearing. You never know when a villain's clothes are packing a surprise weapon," All Might said as he marched into the room, taking his spot behind the podium. "Now then, your first day of foundational heroics. Today we will be having a practical lesson." "What will we be doing?" Kaminari asked, already bouncing in his seat. All Might smirked. "I'm glad you asked." He pulled forth a placard and faced it towards them, bearing the word battle. "Today we will be doing battle trials, but first, you have to look the part." At that, he pushed a button on the podium, and the wall to their left opened, allowing several shelves to slide out, bearing suitcases with their names and class number on them. These were designed based on your quirk registration forms and the request forms you submitted before classes started. The class cheered at that, everyone talking at once, allowing no one to barely understand what was said by each other before All Might took charge once more. "Grab your gear and get suited up. Then meet me at Training Ground Beta," All Might exclaimed, prompting the class to gather their uniforms and head out. Izuku pulled his shirt off as he looked at the contents of his briefcase, the costume that he and Arie designed staring back at him. They spent a full day just talking about costumes and what could work for his hero's suit. The end result left him with what was in the case. "Hey guys!" The voice of Mineta called, who was wearing a purple shirt and mask with a yellow cape, boots, gloves and what appeared to be a bowl but ended up looking like a diaper. Izuku turned around and saw him pointing at a small hole in the wall. "Our seniors left us a gift, a window to heaven itself." "Mineta! It is unbecoming of a hero to peep at our female classmates," Ida chastised while chopping his hand in a very robotic manner. "Don't be such a downer, Ida," the Great continued, unaware that Izuku was walked closer to him. "Think of all the thickness on the other side of this. It's a babe paradise over there. Not manly, dude. Come on, guys. Don't you want to see heaven?" Mineta looked at Kaminari. "You gotta agree with me, dude. I mean, I like women as much as the next guy, sure, but I have a niece now and I gotta be a good example for her." The electricity user shrugged. "Besides, even if I joined in, Arie is over there with them and I'm not risking it. I don't see what the problem is. She's gonna be a looker in 10 years. He shrugged nonchalantly, not paying attention to the looks of disgust from the other men in the room, nor the towering figure behind him before it was too late. Minoru Mineta! The diminutive boy looked up in pants-shitting fear at a snarling Izuku and stared into his rage-filled glowing toxic green eyes. What? Did you just say? Hey now dash. He tried to backtrack but was cut off. You better pray that if we fight each other, you don't end up against me or Kyuka. Izuku leaned in close and whispered. Otherwise, there won't be a body to find. Understand? Mineta bolted out the room in fear. Izuku didn't even look as he just stared at the wall and spoke softly. Kyuka, don't let him be. He didn't need super hearing to know that she was growling at that idea, and if the dull thump was an indication she wasn't pleased with his response. I know, but we can just report him to Nizu. I doubt he would let this slide. Besides, he grinned. As I said, if either of us ends up fighting him, well, his pain is free game. There was no response, but he could tell she was on board, though still not happy about it. Izuku looked back at his case and finished putting it on and looked at himself in the mirror and smiled. It was time to put the fear into people. Kyuka stepped out of the tunnel with the rest of her classmates and looked to a grinning Almight. They say the clothes make the pros and you all are the living proof. The purplet blushed under the praise of the number one hero and looked herself over. Her hero costume consisted of a black leather jacket, a long salmon-colored shirt with several rips at the collar and hem, black pants and boots with stereos built into their shafts. She also has two small, triangular red paint marks just below her eyes, a plain black choker, and white fingerless gloves. She really didn't think that her costume was anything spectacular, but Izuku told her it suited her personality, and loved the look. She also remembered him whispering into her ear that she better be alright with him breaking her spar choker. She dragged him to his room and they didn't leave for a few hours. Whole shit Midoriya! She heard Siro yell. Your costume is creepy as hell! She looked at her boyfriend and ignored the sounds of Siro crying in pain as a vine struck him, while Ibra said something about taking the Lord's name in vain. Indeed, Izuku's costume was a bit creepy, but that was by design. It consisted of tattered buttoned-up dark brown cloak with the hood up, a stitched sack over his head that had two orange glowing eye holes and a gas mask built in. There was a noose tied around his neck like some sort of morbid tie, dark brown pants and ankle-high boots. Around his waist were pouches that she knew had grenade-looking devices that had the gas version of his toxin and spare gas masks. His left hand was wrapped in bandages and his right had a device that collected his toxin sweat and stored it in syringes at the end of his fingers. There was a gun on his left hip that could fire darts that contained his fear toxin. Finally, around his chest was a bullet strap that held some of the fear bullets. It makes sense though, Momo said. Kyuka had a hard time not looking at the taller female's costume as it left little to the imagination. She silently cursed her biness. His quirk works off of fear, so to maximize it he would need to look scary himself. Izuku scratched the back of his head and chuckled. Well, that's one of the reasons. They all looked at him curiously while Kyuka giggled. When I was little, like Arie's age, I had this irrational fear of scarecrows Formidophobia. Momo informed everyone, but when they looked at her confused she explained. Formidophobia is the fear of scarecrows. Wait, it has a name? Izuku said in surprise. Who knew? Anyway, so as a tribute to that stupid fear back then I made myself look like one. Everyone started to talk about each other's costumes before Mina pointed something out. Hey guys, where's Arie? Kyuka looked around and sure enough her daughter wasn't there. She was there in the changing rooms. She looked at Izuku and saw him looking at the entrance. She was about to ask when she heard the sounds of tiny footsteps running towards them. Fear not, Arie's voice came through before she ran into the light and struck a pose. For rescue, Arie is here! When the class looked, their hearts exploded from the sight before them. If anyone looked, they would have seen All Might clutching his chest with blood escaping his mouth. Arie stood there in what looked like a hand-stitch and made hero costume. It was a purple dress with sleeve that had some darker purple highlights and white pieces in the skirt, black pants with some black knee-high boots with a red and purple trim, a dark purple cape held by two red buttons, a belt that had a red rewind symbol belt buckle. On her shoulders were some leather plates spray-painted silver to look like metal, elbow-length white gloves with red pluses. Finally on her face was a purple domino mask. The whole costume looked to have been handmade. Almight was the first to break as he wiped the blood from his mouth. "Young Arie, where did you get the costume?" The young girl pointed at Izuku. "Papa made it for me." When the request for costume designs came in, she asked if she could have one, but since I knew the design company wouldn't do it, we designed her costume and made it together, the young father explained. "That's why you had bandages around your fingers," Kyuka said as she put the pieces together, but pouted at her lover. "I could have helped you two make it. Arie wanted to surprise you." He tried to stay out of the doghouse. Arie nodded her head in confirmation before running to her mother. "What do you think, Mama?" The pout on her face dissolved and a warm smile took its place as she rubbed the top of the white-haired child's head. "You look absolutely amazing, Arie. Good thing a rescue hero is here, these old eyes can struggle to see what could happen." Almight played as he pointed next to him. "Young Arie, could you help this old man keep an eye on today's exercise?" "But you're not old, Mr. Almight," she said as she ran next to the much larger man and stood next to him ready to help nonetheless. The hero barked a laugh. "I'm much older than you might think." He looked to the rest of the gathered class. "Now then, for today's lesson, we will be taking a hands-on approach. While on TV, you see hero fights taking place on the streets, the truth is that most villains never want to be caught outside in the light of day. Back alley deals, safe houses, warehouses, and other such buildings are their preferred areas of operation. Today, I will be splitting you up into randomized teams for the class exercise." All Might was about to say something else when he was promptly interrupted. "Sir, what is the purpose of randomized teams?" Ida asked, his hand raised in the air. His metallic armor gleamed in the sunlight, modeled after the medieval knights, but with modern accents such as exhaust pipes to match his legs. Izuku recognized the design, but would ask later. "Ribbit, will we be expelled if we lose, like with Mr. Aizawa?" Arie asked, her finger on her chin. She wore a green jumpsuit with black and yellow lines running down it, and on her head, she wore a set of goggles with some lights attached. "Doesn't this cape look très magnifique?" Aoyama asked, his purple cape glistening sunlight. His costume looked more like a knight's than Ida's, and even that special belt he wore matched its design. "My quirk isn't super hearing, you know," All Might boomed, calming the class down. "Now then, who can answer Ida's question?" Izuku and Momo raised their hands to answer. "Yaoyorozu? To see how quickly we can adapt to working with a fellow hero whose quirk is unknown to us," she offered. All Might nodded, then looked at Izuku expectantly. "To simulate that in the real world, we won't be able to pick who we work with in an emergency," Izuku asserted. "Very good, both of you," All Might praised. "Thank you, that is a valid point, and I did not see it," Ida said with a nod to them both. All Might then pulled forth a large box. "Form a line, draw a ball from the box, and locate your partner." Izuku drew his lot and looked at the small ball with the letter on it. He felt a tap on his shoulder and saw Momo there holding a ball that also had an on it. "It looks like we'll be partners for this match," she said graciously and smiled down at the boy. He nodded and looked to see who Kyuka was partnered with. She approached them with Kaminari in tow. "So you got Yaoyorozu?" she said with a nod and a smirk. "Replacing me with a better model, I see." Izuku laughed while Momo looked mortified, not realizing it was a joke. It's not like that, Gyro." "It's a joke, Yaoyorozu." Kaminari patted her back. She finally understood and blushed in embarrassment, making the couple laugh harder at her expense. After some time the teams were together, and now it was time to find out who was fighting who, though Izuku and Kyuka were more focused on who was fighting Team A. Team A, villains Izuku Kuyama and Momo Yaoyorozu vs. Team D, heroes Minoru Mineta and Siro Hanta. Neither could stop the grins that appeared on their faces as Kyuka looked to Izuku and conveyed a silent message, "Give him hell." Izuku was more than happy to oblige.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.